Chapter 2467. Casually giving away ancient resources, the saints were inexplicably shocked. They had dared to provoke Tianhu for two reasons. Firstly, it was because of the rules of the saints, and secondly, it was because Tianhu was weak in front of them. Now, because of this mysterious man's words, Tianhu was so scared that he didn't fear them at all. Then, who was this mysterious person? Who are you? Do you know who we are? Another saint pointed at Xianxia and asked loudly. However, anyone could tell that he lacked confidence in his tone. Xianxia turned his head and looked at that person, but just waved his hand casually. This time, Xianxia didn't say anything, but Tianhu understood Xianxia's meaning. Slap. It was another resounding slap to the face. These two slaps made Tianhu feel a little excited. It wasn't the first time these guys had tried to find trouble with him. Every time, Tianhu would be the one to suffer losses and run away. But this time, Tianhu had actually slapped him twice. These two slaps had made Tianhu walk out of the shadow of the past. Subconsciously, Tianhu had always felt that Xianxia was incomparably powerful. Now, with Xianxia backing him, it seemed that Tianhu's confidence had returned after these two slaps. Tianhu, do you want to die? Seeing that Tianhu had slapped them twice in a row, these people didn't dare to do anything. Instead, they looked at Tianhu in shock and fear. After all, Tianhu's identity as the son of divine General Tian Long wasn't just for show. These people dared to bully Tianhu and even cause trouble for him. Deep down, they were probably afraid. They were afraid of Tianhu. They were afraid that one day, Tianhu wouldn't be afraid of them. Then, they would only be bullied. Therefore, when this person threatened Tianhu, it was actually a sign of fear. What did you say? Tianhu looked at that person. This time, without Xianxia's instructions, Tianhu had already walked towards that person. Xianxia nodded in satisfaction. Fortunately, this guy still had some guts. At least he wasn't the kind of person who couldn't support a wall. With some training, this heavenly tiger could still become a good follower. Tianhu walked step by step towards that person. That person didn't expect Tianhu to walk towards him. Subconsciously, he took 3 steps back. Perhaps, if he did not take these 3 steps back, Heavenly Tiger would subconsciously feel a trace of fear. However, this guy's 3 steps back had allowed Tianhu to see their true colors. They were just people who bullied the weak and feared the strong. Scram to the side. I didn't argue with you guys in the past because I gave you guys face. Today, you guys actually dared to cause trouble for me in front of my big brother. I think you guys are the ones who are tired of living. It's fine if I lose face, but if you lose face for my boss, can you afford to pay with your lives? Xianxia's lips curled up slightly. This Tianhu was quite tactful. He made it sound as if he was afraid of embarrassing Xianxia by hitting him. Of course, regardless of what Xianxia was thinking, the others were extremely shocked. Tianhu actually hurt this mysterious person because he was afraid of embarrassing him? If this was spread, no one in the entire demon god realm would believe it. However, it had already happened. Tianhu's performance was not bad. Xianxia knew very well that by controlling Tianhu's divine spark fragment, he had full control over Tianhu's life and death. Tianhu definitely wouldn't be able to resist him. In order to gain an obedient follower, it was necessary to use both the carrot and the stick. As a result, Xianxia casually waved his hand and saw the 3 treasures hover in midair. All right, tell these guys to scram. Take these 3 ordinary materials and go exchange them for wine. I'm still waiting for wine. Ordinary materials. The group of people stared blankly. Even Tianhu didn't collect them immediately. After all, he had obtained 3 ancient resources. The appearance of any single ancient resource would probably cause a bloodbath. Who would have thought that Tianhu's boss would just casually give Tianhu 3 ancient resources? Who would believe such a thing? Even Tianhu's father, Tianlong Shunjiang, wouldn't be so generous. However, the 3 ancient resources were still hovering in midair. There was no room for doubt. What's wrong? Not enough. Xianxia saw that Tianhu was in a daze and interrupted him. Tianhu finally reacted and quickly said, "It's enough, it's enough. Boss, this is too much." Some people thought that Tianhu was an idiot. He actually thought that 3 ancient resources were too much. If he thought it was too much, there would be plenty of people here who wanted them. However, Xian smiled and said, "Just take what I'm giving you. I'll definitely give you more benefits in the future." Xian was speaking the truth. After all, Xian was going to groom Tian Hu as his follower. Naturally, he had to groom Tian Hu. In order to groom Tian Hu, a lot of resources had to be spent. Tian Hu excitedly glanced at Xian. He didn't hold back and casually stored the 3 ancient resources into his universe ring before swaggering forward. At this moment, the group of saints who had come to find trouble with Tian Hu didn't dare to stop him. Most of them were even envious. After all, Tian Hu had a boss who could casually give away ancient resources. It was obvious that he would have a good life in the future. Some people even wanted to run to Xian and beg Xian to accept them as his follower. After all, compared to strength, face, and whatnot weren't that important. Unfortunately, looking at Xian's cold expression, everyone knew that even if they begged Xian to accept them as his follower, they wouldn't stand a chance. Because Xian didn't care about them at all. If Xian knew what these people were thinking, he would probably be very depressed. After all, Xian wouldn't look down on these saints. Even if all of them became Xian's follower, Xian wouldn't complain about having too many. Of course, Tian Hu wouldn't really exchange 3 ancient resources for wine. One had to know that ancient resources were extremely rare and contained boundless divine power and the power of laws. Whether it was forging weapons, refining pills, or other uses, they would be very useful. For example, one of the 3 ancient resources that Xian gave was a material for forging weapons. Although it was only a small piece, if used sparingly, it would definitely be enough to forge 6 to 8 peerless weapons. If Tian Hu was really that stupid, he probably wouldn't be qualified to become a saint. After obtaining the Jade Universe wine that he had reserved, Xian and Tian Hu walked out of the pavilion. They didn't even look at the group of saints. Only when Xian and Tian Hu were far away did they dare to speculate about Xian's identity. Some people said that Xian was a super expert who had accepted Tian Long Xinjiang's request to teach Tian Hu. Chapter 2468. Another ancient mystique soon after, some people speculated that Xian might be a core member of a super force. However, Tian Hu was already the son of divine General Tian Long. So who could be more noble than Tian Hu? In an instant, there were all kinds of speculations. Some people even speculated that he might be the illegitimate son of the demon god Domain's divine lord. After all, the demon god Domain's divine lord had never had an heir, so it was not impossible for him to have an illegitimate son. Unfortunately, no matter how they speculated, they could only speculate. No one would give them the real answer. Even Tian Hu did not know Xian's true identity. "Boss, didn't you just say that you would stay in that city temporarily? Why are you leaving now?" Along the way, Tian Hu asked Xian with some doubt. This time, the word boss came from the bottom of his heart. "I don't like the environment there." Xian replied indifferently. Xian could not tell Tian Hu that, because he had caused a ruckus at the Jade Universe wine. Not only did he attract attention, but he also attracted prying eyes. In order to prevent his identity from being exposed, he left. Xian would only tell Tian Hu that he wanted to find a better environment. An excuse that was not an excuse. Unfortunately, Tian Hu would never suspect him. When Xian finally heard the answer, Tian Hu immediately began to think. After a while, Tian Hu said to Xian, "Boss, I know a place that you might like." "Oh, tell me about it." Since Xian did not have a destination, he might as well listen to Tian Hu's arrangements. "Boss, it's like this. Our tribe has a manor outside of Starfall Valley. That place is filled with divine energy, and we can sense some star energy from time to time. Moreover, that is our tribe's internal cultivation ground. Outsiders rarely come in. Why don't we go there?" "Starfall Valley? Star energy?" Xian nodded slightly. Although he did not know where that place was, it was the secret cultivation ground of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp's tribe, so it must be extraordinary. "All right, let's go there." Xian nodded in agreement. In fact, Xian knew that Tian Hu was returning the favor. After all, Xian had given Tian Hu 3 ancient resources. Not to mention Tian Hu himself, even the entire Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe would owe Yi Xian a favor. Therefore, Tianhu understood that no one would stop him from bringing Yi Xian over. The two of them hurried along the way, but it did not take them too long to reach the Falling Star Valley. The origin of the name Falling Star Valley was because a star had once fallen here. A falling star was not considered rare in the divine realm. The key was that this star contained a trace of star energy. The power of stars was different from the power of laws. It was hard to say which was stronger. However, in the God realm, which was illuminated by 10 suns, it was very difficult to see the light of the stars, let alone cultivate the power of the stars. Therefore, the power of stars was considered rare. Of course, it wasn't that there weren't people in the divine realm who cultivated the power of stars, but the majority of them gave up after cultivating for a short while. Even for the Heaven Dragon Drunk Prawn clan, who possessed such a precious land, there were very few clansmen who actually came to cultivate the power of stars. Moreover, the majority of them came with a curious and fun attitude. Of course, even if it was such a useless secret land, with the tyrannical Sky Dragon Divine General, he would not allow others to enter. Therefore, the Falling Star Valley was naturally deserted. At this time, Yi Xian was brought into the Falling Star Valley by Tianhu. Although he saw many pavilions and halls, other than a few servants, he did not see any cultivators. "Boss, this is the place. You can choose whichever hall you want to stay in. Anyway, at this time, only the two of us will be here." "At this time? What do you mean?" "Oh, boss, you don't know. In 2 months' time, it will be the clan's 10 years competition. No one will come here to waste time. I have already informed the servants here. Anyway, you can just treat this place as your own home. If you need anything, just let me know," Tianhu said casually with a smile on his face. He was very happy to have found a place that Yi Xian liked to stay. "Are you going back to participate in the competition too?" Yi Xian suddenly asked Tianhu. When Tianhu heard this, he showed an awkward expression. "Boss, I am the young clan leader. Of course, I don't need to participate in the competition." Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly. From Tianhu's tone, Yi Xian understood that Tianhu did not need to participate in the competition, because even if he did, Tianhu would only be at the bottom of his peers. Tianhu was known as the son of Saint and had the mysterious ability of Dharma fusion. Unfortunately, Tianhu only knew how to use Dharma fusion. Anyone who knew his background could easily defeat him. Yi Xian was never stingy to his own people. Even if Tianhu was the divine beast of the demon god's realm, since he was now his underling, Yi Xian would not treat him badly. System: search for a suitable divine ability for Tianhu and give him suitable elixirs and treasures. Yi Xian ordered the system. Although Yi Xian knew that he would have to pay a huge price this time, Yi Xian did not care. Ding! System notification. Found a suitable divine ability. 13 forms of the dragon dominating the heavens. Ding! System notification. Host does not have enough faith points to exchange. 13 forms of the dragon dominating the heavens? From the name, this divine ability seemed to be a combination of skills. However, since Yi Xian had decided to give Tianhu a divine ability, Yi Xian would do as he said. System: use resources to exchange for the insufficient faith points. I want to exchange for this divine ability. Ding! System notification. Resource exchange successful. Divine ability exchange successful. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the 13 forms of the dragon dominating the heavens. Would the host like to cultivate it immediately? No need. Give me a physical body. A moment later, a golden scroll appeared in Yi Xian's hand. This was the 13 forms of the dragon dominating the heavens. Although the exchange this time did not bankrupt Yi Xian, it was not far off. His faith points had been emptied and more than half of his stored resources had been used up. One had to know that these resources included the resources that Yi Xian had accumulated from killing enemies during this period. One could imagine how much Yi Xian had invested in this exchange. Tianhu, come here. Yi Xian shouted to Tianhu. Tianhu did not hesitate and walked to Yi Xian's side. In fact, when Yi Xian took out the scroll, Tianhu saw it, but did not think much of it. Boss, what's the matter? Tianhu asked Yi Xian. Chapter 2469. Cultivating the Power of the Star Sky Tiger was slightly taken aback. At first, he did not pay much attention to the scroll that Xian gave him. After all, in the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe, there were naturally many good techniques. However, it was rare to see techniques stored in scrolls. Subconsciously, Sky Tiger did not feel that the scroll was precious, so he opened it subconsciously. However, the moment he opened the scroll, he was so shocked that he was speechless. This was an ancient divine ability. This was a scroll of an ancient divine ability. Sky Tiger screamed in his heart, but because of the shock, he did not say a word. Sky Tiger was the young clan leader of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe, and at the same time, he was a saint. Ancient divine abilities were much stronger than current divine abilities, but they had a very special characteristic. That was, every divine ability could only be cultivated by a specific group of people or people with special physiques. Therefore, the introduction of the ancient divine ability first introduced the requirements to be able to cultivate the divine ability. As for current divine abilities, as long as one was willing, anyone could cultivate them. Of course, this was excluding innate divine abilities. At this moment, Xian did not give him any innate divine ability, so it must be an ancient divine ability. Boss, this is too precious. I can't accept it. Sky Tiger hurriedly passed the scroll to Xian. After all, ancient divine abilities were things that only existed in legends. Even if Sky Tiger was bold, he would not dare to accept it so easily. What I gave you is yours. All right, just take it. Follow me in the future, and there will be many benefits. Don't be so anxious all the time, Xian said casually. After he finished speaking, he walked towards a large hall, because at this moment, the system notification sounded. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for activating the mandatory hidden mission, Power of the Stars. Mission requirement. Within 3 months, the host must cultivate the power of the stars. If the mission is failed, the host will lose half of his realm. If the mission is successful, the host will receive a special reward. 3 months. This mission not only had a time limit, but also a punishment. Obviously, it was not that simple. Therefore, Xian was in a hurry. Tianhu, go back and prepare for the grand competition. Cultivate well. I hope to hear good news from you. As for me, I will also try to cultivate the power of the stars. When he heard that Xian was going to cultivate the power of the stars, Tian, who naturally thought that Xian was using this as an excuse to send Tianhu away so that he could focus on his cultivation. After all, the power of stars in the entire Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe was recognized as a useless power. Thank you, boss. Suddenly, Tianhu fell to his knees. Xian had given him so much that Tianhu didn't know how to express his gratitude. Xian did not stop Tianhu. After all, Xian wanted an obedient follower. Xian waved his hand again, and Tianhu silently retreated. After Sky Tiger left, Xian immediately went to the outskirts of Falling Star Valley. There was a stargazing platform here. If one wanted to cultivate, they would usually comprehend here. In the distance, there was a valley. Obviously, it was formed by a strong collision. The valley was rather huge, but because of the changes in time, the periphery was covered with giant trees. Only the center had circles of light bursting out from time to time. Xian knew that it was the power of the stars. The power of the stars was very strange. If it was the power of the laws, then one would have to go in and observe it to discover its uniqueness. Only then could one comprehend it. However, the power of the stars was not like that. To comprehend the power of the stars, one could only find a suitable location. If one was too close or too far, it would be difficult to comprehend it. The strangest thing was that although Xian was hundreds of thousands of miles away from the center of the eruption of the power of the stars, it seemed as if the power of the stars was right beside Xian. It was so clear. This strange power of the stars was not the power of the laws. Therefore, whether it was comprehending or using it, it was not carried out according to the normal power of the laws. Of course, for Xian, this was not a problem at all. System, analyze the comprehension plan and provide the most reasonable method of comprehension. Yi Xian had the system, so whether it was the power of the stars or the power of the laws, there was not much difference for Yi Xian. To Yi Xian, he could find a most reasonable and fastest method of comprehension. Yi Xian silently sat in the pavilion. However, when Yi Xian closed his eyes and started to comprehend, a strange scene happened. At the core of the power of the stars, a projection of Yi Xian appeared. It was as if Yi Xian had been projected into the core of the power of the stars. However, Yi Xian was completely unaware of this. At this moment, Yi Xian had entered an extremely mysterious state. It was as if he had turned into a ray of light that constantly shuttled between the stars. Green stars, blue stars, red stars, purple stars, round stars, flat stars, irregular stars. All kinds of stars shuttled back and forth in Yi Xian's consciousness. Yi Xian had already forgotten himself and everything else as he wholeheartedly immersed himself in the light of the stars. Slowly, a faint halo appeared around Yi Xian. This halo came from the core of the stars. It was the power of the stars. The power of the stars slowly gathered around Yi Xian before shuttling in and out of Yi Xian's body. Every time it entered and exited, it would cause a small change in Yi Xian's body. This change was very small, and it could even be said that it did not have any effect on Yi Xian's body. However, this change was very important. It was because of this change that Yi Xian's body started to gradually accept the power of the stars. The power of the stars was different from the power of the laws. Therefore, it needed to open up a new place to accommodate it. Gradually, more and more power of the stars gathered around Yi Xian, and it became denser and denser. Perhaps Yi Xian would be able to comprehend the power of the stars in the next moment. At the same time, Sky Tiger had already returned to the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe. However, when Sky Tiger returned, he was immediately taken away by a few elders and his father. This was because before Sky Tiger returned, a piece of news was first sent to the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe. This news was naturally related to the 3 ancient resources. Not to mention 3, even if it was just one ancient resource, it was already enough to cause a huge commotion. Unexpectedly, Sky Tiger actually knew someone and casually gave out 3 ancient resources. This news naturally caused a huge reaction in the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe. The moment Sky Tiger returned, he was immediately taken away. This was considered normal. Sky Tiger, I heard that when you went out this time, someone gave you 3 ancient resources. Is this true? The person who spoke was an elder of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe. He was in charge of law enforcement in the tribe, so he had always been feared. Chapter 2470. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio Tian Hu's Smugness. That's right, disciplinary elder. This time, I have obtained 3 ancient resources. However, what does this have to do with you? Tian Hu said without hesitation. In an instant, the disciplinary elder's expression darkened. Don't be rude, Tiger Air. Tian Long Deity General reprimanded Tian Hu, but his tone was not harsh. Tian Long Deity General knew why the disciplinary elder would ask such a question. In the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe, Tian Long Deity General's cultivation was the highest. However, the other elders were not much weaker than him. In fact, the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe's Holy Sun position had always been opposed to giving it to Tian Hu. After all, the benefits of the position of Holy Sun were simply innumerable. Although Tian Hu was considered a genius because he had fused his law form with his body, in the eyes of the other elders, Tian Hu's actual combat strength was just so. Furthermore, they also had children. Why couldn't the position of Holy Sun be given to their children? If not for Tian Long Deity General's position in the Demon God domain, the position of Holy Sun would have been contested. Even so, there were still quite a few people who harbored ill intentions. For example, the disciplinary elder could not wait to monitor Tian Hu at all times so that he could find something to use against him and kick him off the Holy Sun position. This time, since Tian Hu had obtained the ancient resources, these people would naturally have evil intentions. Ancient resources were extremely precious. If they were able to obtain them, not to mention their descendants. Even their own strength would be strengthened by a few points. This time, the main purpose of summoning Tianhu was to snatch the 3 ancient resources from Tianhu. However, Tianhu was not so easy to bully now. On the way back, Tianhu had successfully mastered the first form of the 13 forms of the dragon dominating the heavens. Yixian's words were like an imperial edict to Tianhu. Although Yixian did not say that he would let Tianhu in first place in the tribe's grand competition. Perhaps he had said that he would wait for Tianhu's good news. Hence, Tianhu hoped that he could win first place. Not only were there ancient resources, but there was also an ancient ability. Yixian had given Tianhu so many precious treasures. How could Tianhu not be confident? Of course, with confidence came hard work. Therefore, Tianhu did not waste a single moment on the way back. Speaking of which, this guy's talent was not bad. He actually comprehended the first style of the 13 styles of the proud dragon dominating the heavens. Of course, the further one mystique, the harder it was more difficult. Tianhu was only at this moment. Tianhu in the past, he had listened to his father, but this time he refuted. Father, don't they just want me to take out the resources and distribute them to their descendants? Why should they do that? My Tianhu's things were not stolen or snatched. Why should I give them to them? Then I'll tell you the truth. Not only did my boss give me 3 ancient resources, he also gave me an ancient godly technique. Why? Do you want it too? Ancient mystique. Everyone, including Tianlong Deity General, was shocked to the core. In the entire demon god's domain, there were only a few ancient mystiques. Now, Tianhu was telling them that someone had given Tianhu an ancient mystique. How could they accept this? Who are you telling the truth? Tianlong Deity General could not help but ask Tianhu, Father, could it be that you still don't trust your son? This ancient divine ability was specially chosen by Boss for me. It's extremely compatible with me. It is called the 13 forms of the dragon dominating the heavens. This is impossible. Even in my entire Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe, we don't have a single ancient divine ability. We only have a remnant scroll. You said that someone gave you an ancient divine ability. Do you think we will believe it? If the boss you speak of can give away the ancient mystiques and resources as he pleases, then why doesn't he dare to meet us? The punishment elder said sternly. He knew very well that if Tianhu was telling the truth, then Tianhu's status in the tribe would be greatly improved and no one would be able to shake him. This guy loved his grandson very much. It could be said that if Tianhu had something good, he would definitely give it to his grandson. In addition, his grandson was also very capable. It could be said that his fighting strength was stronger than Tianhu. Therefore, few people in the tribe would say otherwise. Asking my boss to meet you? Punishment elder, you think too highly of yourself. What kind of person is my boss? Even if you want to meet him, I'm afraid he may not necessarily meet you. My boss said that I can teach this ancient divine ability to others. However, the number of people I can teach is limited to 3. Father, don't worry. I'll show it to you now. However, you must remember that you can't teach this divine ability to others. Otherwise, if my boss blames you, you'll be in trouble. As he spoke, Tianhu had already passed the scroll to Tianlong Deity General. Tianlong Deity General naturally did not refuse. He took the scroll and set a restriction with his divine thought before carefully opening it. The punishment elder was so excited that he could not wait to rush over and take a look. Unfortunately, he did not dare to do so. One should know that Tianlong Deity General was not only powerful, but also the tribe leader. If he offended him, he was afraid that he would suffer. Tianlong Deity General looked at the scroll for more than 2 hours before returning it to Tianhu. Father, do you understand? Sai, what a pity you were. This is an ancient mystique. It is a pity that I can't practice it. It can even be said that except for you, no one can practice it. I don't know if your boss deliberately changed it, or this ancient mystique was originally like this. If you want to practice this ancient mystique, the first requirement is to integrate with the body. So, we can't practice it at all. How could this be? Tianhu was inexplicably shocked. In fact, Yixian did not say that he was allowed to teach, but he also did not say that he was not allowed to teach. That was why Tianhu made such a decision. But now, Tianhu realized that Yi Xian had already made arrangements. This ancient mystique was tailor-made for him. It would be extremely difficult for others to practice it. But don't worry, Huer. Although I can't practice the ancient mystique, I can still learn from it. It's not a waste of time. Tianlong deity general smiled. At this time, the punishment elder's heart felt like it was being scratched by a cat. Tianlong deity general would not lie. So what Tianlong deity general said must be true. At this moment, he could not wait to take a look at the scroll. Unfortunately, he did not dare to. Chapter 2471. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio Misunderstanding, because at this time, everyone knew that the situation in the clan had changed. The grandson of the punishment elder could no longer steal Tianhu's cultivation resources. Sky Tiger's position would be consolidated like never before. No one would be able to shake it. Sky Tiger left the main hall and returned to his residence. Then, he shut himself in and cultivated in silence. Outside, hundreds of guards stood guard beside Sky Tiger's residence. No one was allowed to disturb him. The young disciples of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp Tribe did not understand what was going on, but they could feel the unusual atmosphere. The competition soon began. What surprised all the young disciples was that Sky Tiger participated in the competition. Moreover, from the beginning, Sky Tiger had been dominating all the way. Sky Tiger's strange attack was not from the tribe. However, all the elders were silent. No matter how dissatisfied the tribe members were, they did not care at all, until the news spread that Sky Tiger had obtained the ancient mystique. In an instant, no one was dissatisfied. In 2 months, Sky Tiger had only learned the first 3 moves. However, those 3 moves were enough to defeat all the enemies. Without any pressure, he crushed all the way. The mysterious leader of Sky Tiger had attracted the attention of countless people at the same time. Unfortunately, no one could find out. Sky Tiger had never revealed where Yi Xian was, so it was impossible for people to find out. At this time, Yi Xian had been cultivating with his eyes closed for more than 2 months. In 2 months, Yi Xian did not open his eyes, nor did he move his body. On this day, under Sky Tiger's lead, the Sky Dragon Deity General and several important members of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp Tribe had arrived. However, all of them waited silently outside. No one dared to take a step forward. Sky Tiger had proved the authenticity of the ancient mystique with his strength. At the same time, the 3 ancient resources had been exchanged for suitable resources. It could be said that Sky Tiger's leader, no one in the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp Tribe, dared to show any disrespect to this mysterious person. Everyone gathered at the entrance, waiting for Yi Xian to come out. Fortunately, these people did not go in to disturb Yi Xian. After all, Yi Xian was currently at a critical juncture. Whether he could succeed or not would depend on these last few days. Light flashed around Yi Xian as more and more power of the stars gathered around Yi Xian, turning him into a man of light. If someone were to see Yi Xian now, they would be extremely shocked. This was because Yi Xian no longer had its original appearance. It was completely transparent. All of Yi Xian's internal organs were clearly visible, but even so, they had completely transformed into rays of light at this moment. A mysterious and profound energy swirled around Yi Xian. If anyone who had comprehended the power of the stars were here, they would definitely cry out in surprise. Yi Xian's reaction was 1,000 times better than theirs. Stellar body tempering. This phenomenon could only be called stellar body tempering. Unfortunately, no one knew what stellar body tempering was. This was because no one had ever encountered such a situation. Yi Xian had completely lost all perception of the outside world. At this moment, Yi Xian was immersed in the countless stars shuttling back and forth. Time continued to pass as Tianhu and the others waited silently. However, there was no movement from inside. At this moment, Yi Xian was also experiencing a great challenge. One had to know that this mission had a time limit. If Yi Xian did not complete the mission within the time limit, he would lose half of his cultivation base. This was enough to make Xian despair. It was basically equivalent to certain death. Unfortunately, Xian did not know how much time was passing. He did not know that he did not have much time left. Day after day, time slowly passed. Tianhu habitually raised his head to look inside. If it wasn't for his father's request, Tianhu would have already rushed in to look for Xian. At this moment, Tianhu once again looked forward. He couldn't hold it in any longer and directly shouted, "Boss, can we come in?" After shouting this sentence, Tianhu silently looked ahead. All of a sudden, an incomparably ancient yet extremely gentle aura descended upon them. At the same time, a powerful ray of light burst out from the top of everyone's head and spread out. 1 round, 2 rounds, 3 rounds. Rays of light fluctuated rapidly in the distance. The power was not terrifying. On the contrary, it was very gentle. However, it was simple and ancient. What kind of power is this? Tianlong deity raised his head to look at the circles of light in the sky and asked subconsciously. Unfortunately, no one could answer him because no one had seen such a strange phenomenon before. At the same time, Xian finally opened his eyes. At the same time that Xian opened his eyes, the system notification sounded. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for completing the Stellar Body Tempering mission. You have obtained a special reward, a deluxe gift pack. You have obtained a special material, 9-star Pearls Wonderstone. You have obtained experience points as a reward and leveled up by 1 level. Ding! Host has broken through to upper rank for Divine Emperor Realm. Deluxe gift pack, 9-star Pearls Wonderstone. The sudden reward caused Xian to be slightly stunned. The reward this time could be said to be generous beyond Xian's expectations. At this moment, Xian still had to thank the Heavenly Tiger. One had to know that as soon as Xian's mind returned, he already knew how much time had passed. If it wasn't for the Heavenly Tiger's call, Xian would have fallen this time. Most importantly, it was not that Xian did not comprehend the Stellar Body Tempering mission. On the contrary, he had comprehended too much. Xian had gained a lot from comprehending the Stellar Body Tempering mission this time. However, Xian helplessly discovered that the Stellar Body Tempering mission could only be used occasionally. This was because there was no way to replenish it. The realm of the gods was surrounded by 10 suns. The Stellar Body Tempering mission had long been blocked out. Xian did not open the gift bag. Instead, he stood up silently and walked outside. At this time, the Stellar Body Tempering mission had not completely disappeared from Xian's body. Therefore, Xian's every movement was accompanied by countless illusions. These are not illusions left behind by fast movements, nor were they illusions left behind by illusions. They were illusions formed naturally by the Stellar Body Tempering mission. Xian walked forward, but behind him was a large string of illusions. The moment he walked out, everyone was shocked. Tianlong Deity General and the others did not know that Xian's current situation was due to the Stellar Body Tempering mission. Therefore, they could not explain Xian's current situation. Most importantly, Tianlong Deity General's cultivation was profound. Even without using his divine consciousness, he could see many things just by relying on his eyes. Physical doppelganger. Tianlong Deity General muttered in a very low voice. However, who was around? Who could not hear him? When they heard the words physical doppelganger, everyone was shocked. Physical doppelganger represented a divine ability. At the same time, it represented a kind of identity. Chapter 2472. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Aloa's new clue was a physical clone. Everyone, including Tianlong Divine General, was speechless at this moment. Of course, with their knowledge, they could tell that this was only the most basic form, or that this was just the beginning of the cultivation. However, the ability to create a physical clone was something that only the demon god's domain's divine lord possessed. Therefore, they were certain that this person in front of them had a close relationship with the divine lord. In this way, many things became clear. Why was this person able to give Tianhu 3 pieces of ancient resources and an ancient Divine Lord's ability? Perhaps only the Divine Lord could have such a background. Of course, this was just a huge misunderstanding. How could Yi Xian have any relationship with the demon god's domain's Divine Lord? In fact, he had never even met the Divine Lord. If there was any relationship, it would be that Yi Xian was preparing to find Luo Luo from the demon god's domain's Divine Lord. "Boss, you're finally out?" Tianhu said in surprise. Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly, but he was still slightly afraid. After all, which one of the people standing in front of him didn't emit a powerful aura? Yi Xian was very clear that any one of these people would be able to instantly take him down. However, since these people did not use their divine sense to probe him, nor did they attack him immediately, it meant that they had no ill intentions towards him. "Who are these people?" Yi Xian asked Tianhu. When Tianhu heard Yi Xian's question, he immediately began to introduce them to Yi Xian. It turned out that Tian Long, Divine General, and the others wanted to meet Tianhu because of the Divine Lord's ancient Divine Lord. Hence this trip. After Tianhu's introduction, Yi Xian was even more shocked. He did not expect that he would meet a Divine General of the Demon God's domain so soon. Of course, Yi Xian did not show any expression at this moment. He was very calm and collected. After chatting with Tian Long, Divine General, for a while, Tian Long, Divine General, and the others left. With a huge misunderstanding in front of them, the people of the Heaven Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe only had fear and no doubt towards Yi Xian. As for Yi Xian, it was naturally impossible for him to offend these people, let alone befriend them. Therefore, this meeting was rather indifferent. After the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe's people left, Tianhu excitedly said to Yi Xian, "Boss, I was fortunate enough to not disappoint you. This time, I have successfully obtained first place in the clan's grand competition." Tianhu had actually been holding back these words for a long time. In his heart, this was a mission given to him by Yi Xian, so he naturally had to do a good job. However, Yi Xian did not take it too seriously. Therefore, Yi Xian nodded and said to Tianhu, "Let's go. Let's leave this place." Since Tianlong, Xianxia, and the others knew that Yi Xian was here, this place was no longer safe. Thus, Yi Xian had no choice but to leave. "Boss, where are we going? Didn't you say that you wanted to comprehend the power of the stars here? Why do you want to leave?" "I have already comprehended the power of the stars here, so there is no reason for me to continue staying here. As for where to go, it doesn't matter. I will go wherever I go." Yi Xian simply wanted to leave this place. As for where to go, he did not have a destination. If he wanted to return to the Kunlun Divine Domain, he would need to go to the 8 great Divine Generals' residences. Only there would be a passageway. Other things aside, if Yi Xian mentioned that he wanted to go to the Kunlun Divine Domain, it would immediately arouse suspicion. At this moment, Yi Xian could not compete with the 8 great Divine Generals. Thus, it would be unwise to provoke any of the 8 great Divine Generals. It might be possible to find Luo Luo's whereabouts, but he had Tianhu by his side. Thus, Tianhu might be able to obtain some useful information. As the two of them walked, Yi Xian asked Tianhu, "Tianhu, do you know that there's a saint whose true form is the 9-tailed sky loathed fox?" Tianhu looked at Yi Xian in confusion. "Boss, you know about the Saint of 9 Paths?" "Saint of 9 Paths?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. It seemed that Luo Luo's identity in the demon god domain was not simple. "Yes, it's the saint son of the 9 Tao. Every saint son has his own name. For example, the other saints call me the saint son of the heavenly dragon. However, the saint son of the 9 Tao is very special. It's said that he's not from the demon god domain. The 9-tailed heavenly loathed fox is extremely noble. Even the Divine Lord has to give him some face. Moreover, the saint son of the 9 Tao is highly valued by the Divine Lord." Tianhu simply told him what he knew. However, it wasn't of much use to Yi Xian. After talking for a long time, it could be summarized in one sentence. That was, Yi Xian was currently powerless to save Luo Luo. It had to be known that it was impossible for the Divine Lord of the Demon God's domain to allow Luo Luo to go into seclusion out of respect. It was probably because Luo Luo also wanted to leave the demon god's domain to look for Yixian. Therefore, the divine master of the demon god domain could only trap Luo Luo. When Yixian came to the god domain, he was separated from Luo Luo. Therefore, Luo Luo would not know that Yixian was in the Kunlun god domain. She would also not know about the conflict between Yixian and the demon god domain. Perhaps Luo Luo would not be mistreated in the demon god domain. On the contrary, she would be valued because of her noble identity. After some analysis, Yixian knew that Luo Luo would not be mistreated. Therefore, he was not in a hurry to find Luo Luo. However, Yixian did not know that ever since he came to the demon god domain, Luo Luo had been anxious. Yixian and Luo Luo had a special connection. Due to the uniqueness of the demon god domain, Yixian's ability to sense was suppressed after he came to the demon god domain. As a result, Yixian could not accurately pinpoint Luo Luo's location. However, because Yixian came to the demon god domain, Luo Luo's ability to sense was strengthened. It could be said that every time Yixian moved, Luo Luo could clearly sense it. Luo Luo knew very well that Yixian came here for her. Luo Luo knew what happened to the human race in the demon god domain. Therefore, Luo Luo was very worried about Yixian. Unfortunately, she could not do anything. Ever since she came to the god domain, she was brought here by a mysterious power. It could even be said that this power was so strong that even the divine master of the demon god domain had to bow down to it. This was a super powerful power. At the same time, it was also a peerless elite. Luo Luo did not know who this person was. However, her every move, every word, and every action were all under this person's surveillance. Even if she was the holy son of the demon god domain, it was just that person's arrangement. Of course, Luo Luo could feel that person's goodwill. Chapter 2473. The Yellow Sand, Zone Yixian, and Tianhu had traversed thousands of realms just to reach a dangerous place. Tianhu stood behind Yixian and asked Yixian hesitantly, "Boss, are we really going in? We're already here. Do you think we should go in?" Yixian looked at the boundless yellow sand in front of him and said calmly. Yixian had deliberately chosen this place because this time Yixian wanted to increase his strength in one go. At this moment, Yixian realized that everything he wanted to do was because he was not strong enough. Not strong enough. Therefore, this time, Yixian wanted to increase his strength crazily. First, it was the trial in the mysterious place. Yixian did not even qualify to participate because he was not strong enough, so he could only be teleported out. After that, it was Luo's matter, and then he had to leave the demon god's domain. In short, everything was because he was not strong enough. If he stayed outside, he would have to worry about his identity being exposed and being hunted down. Therefore, Yixian did not have many choices. Entering this place and quickly increasing his strength was perhaps his only choice. At this moment, the yellow sand zone that Yixian saw was quite famous in the demon god's domain. This place was called the Drought Sea. The Drought Sea was huge, but even divine beasts did not dare to enter. This was because the Drought Sea not only had an extremely violent natural climate, but it was also inhabited by the ancient beasts. It was said that the Drought Sea was formed because of a huge explosion. In ancient times, the Drought Sea was a very famous battlefield in the Great War between the gods. Thousands of powerful ancient supremes fought here. They tore through the void and trampled over mountains and rivers. However, for some reason, they broke through a mystic realm. It was a completely isolated mystery world, a mystery world that belonged to the ancient beasts. The remaining strong cultivators were crazily hunted down by the ancient beasts and died one by one. After the mystery world exploded, everything inside the mystery world was scattered here. The yellow sand area was only the outermost area of the Drought Sea. As for the inside, it was even more terrifying. According to Tianhu, even the Divine Master had come here personally. However, he had left in less than 10 days with a fearful expression. This was because there was an extremely powerful existence in the Drought Sea, an existence that even the demon god's god domain's divine master couldn't deal with. Fortunately, the Drought Sea hadn't moved in the slightest for millions of years. It was as if this was an independent place that wasn't affected by anything in the outside world. In fact, some experts from the demon god realm would also form teams and enter to search for treasures. After all, there were many special resources in the Drought Sea. Moreover, those ancient beasts were also extremely valuable. Ancient beasts didn't have transfiguration divine abilities, nor did they have high intelligence. Furthermore, all of them focused on cultivating their physical bodies. Tianhu had said that the reason why he was able to fuse his Dharma power was because his father, Tianlong Shanjiang, had come here when he was young and had a fortuitous encounter. Then, he combined it with his own understanding and created the cultivation method of Dharma power fusion. That was why Xian had chosen this location. He had chosen the Drought Sea. Since the ancient beasts were so mysterious, Xian would surely be able to obtain an opportunity to improve his strength quickly. Fear? Perhaps others would be afraid, but not Xian. To Xian, there was nothing to be afraid of. The Drought Sea was home to powerful ancient beasts. To Xian, this was the best place to cultivate. After all, Xian needed to devour ancient beasts to improve quickly. Xian didn't want to wait any longer. He had waited for too long. It was time to explode. There were still many things for Xian to do. He couldn't waste too much time in the demon god's god domain. If you don't want to go in, then wait for me outside. I'll find you when I come out. Xian indifferently said to Tianhu. After that, he no longer paid any attention to Tianhu and directly walked forward. Actually, it was a good thing that Xian didn't bring Tianhu with him. After all, if Tianhu went in with him, some of Xian's secrets would be exposed. At least for now, Tianhu didn't have a right to know Xian's secrets. Tianhu hesitated for a moment. By the time he wanted to chase after him, it was already too late. Xian had already disappeared. Therefore, he could only stay where he was and cultivate while waiting for Xian to return. After entering the yellow sand zone, there was nothing special in the beginning. Here, there was only an isolation zone that stretched as far as the eye could see. Regardless of whether it was the stone god beast or ancient beast, they would rarely come here. However, it was also because of this that there were humans here. Xian kept his divine will extended outwards. Therefore, it didn't take long for him to find a small human tribe. This was a tribe built around an oasis. There were only a few hundred people here, but it was very peaceful. Xian didn't hesitate and walked over. The people here had very low cultivation levels. They made some simple Dharma treasures to protect their homes. At the same time, they hunted some weak ancient beasts or divine beasts to cultivate. At this moment, they suddenly saw Xian in the yellow sand, which immediately attracted the attention of the people here. "Father, Father, there's someone in the desert," a youth shouted loudly. After a moment, a burly man rushed over. He was holding a large knife made of an unknown material in his hand. There were a few people behind him. "Go in. Everyone go in quickly. There's an array in the house. Activate the array immediately if something's wrong," the burly man shouted loudly. Soon, all the people around the oasis hid in the only big stone house in the oasis. Xian knew what these people were worried about. Therefore, he didn't mind and continued walking over. "Stop right there. Who are you?" "I'm Xian. I'm just passing by and would like to rest here for a while." After all, he was a human. It wasn't easy to meet a free human in the demon god's domain. Xian wouldn't find trouble with these people. You're a human?" The burly man hesitated for a moment. After recognizing Xian, he asked hesitantly. "Yes, I'm a human." Xian didn't hide anything and answered directly. "You're a human? Haha, quick, invite him in." When they heard that he was a fellow human, the people didn't stop Xian. Instead, they quickly invited Xian in. "Haha, brother, don't blame them. You know that people like us who live in this desert will be eaten by divine beasts or ancient beasts one day if we don't keep our guard up. May I ask which tribe you're from, brother?" "I'm not from here. I'm from outside. This time, I'm here to investigate." "What? You want to go in?" "Brother, you're too bold. Although the lives of humans are as cheap as grass here, You don't have to humiliate yourself like this. You're just gonna die if you go in. Chapter 2474. God-slaying set. Seeing that Yi Xian was silent, the burly man hesitated for a moment before handing a green card to Yi Xian. Brother, take this. Perhaps it will be of use to you. Yi Xian picked up the card. It was also made of an unknown material, but there was an ancient word being sealed on it. What is this? Yi Xian asked curiously. We don't know what this is either. We accidentally obtained this from an ancient beast during a hunt. Although we don't know what it is, we do know that as long as you use your divine sense to activate it, it will create the phantom of an ancient beast that will protect you. Card? Phantom of an ancient beast? Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. It seemed that the Drought Sea held its own secrets. I don't need this. After all, this thing will be of great use to you. The burly man hesitated for a moment. This thing was of great use to them. It could be said that they had relied on this thing to hunt ancient beasts several times. It was also because of this thing that they had been able to fend off the attacks of divine beasts several times. The burly man frowned. The humans who lived in the Drought Sea had a tradition. Once they met a fellow tribesman in need, they would help them with all their might. After all, it was already very difficult to survive in this place. If they did not help each other, the human race would have been wiped out long ago. Seeing that Yi Xian had rejected him, the burly man felt a little guilty. After hesitating for a moment, the burly man's eyes suddenly lit up. He took out a round plate. Brother, since you don't want the card, I'll give this to you. To be honest, we've only activated this thing once when we obtained it. That time, we summoned a dozen powerful ancient beasts. Unfortunately, for some reason, we couldn't use it again. So, although this thing is powerful, I can't tell you how to use it. Take it first. Who knows, it might be of some help to you on the way. Yi Xian did not understand the tradition of helping each other in the Drought Sea, but he knew how to repay kindness. Yi Xian would not be stingy if these people could help him without holding back in their first meeting. All right, I'll take this. These pills are for you. Share them with your tribesmen. They will be good for your tribesmen. The burly man did not know that the pills that Yi Xian was giving him were cultivation pills that were hard to come by outside. Therefore, he accepted them without hesitation. After leaving the tribe, Yi Xian took out the strange round plate as he walked. What is this thing? Yi Xian was confused. The round plate's design was simple. If the burly man's introduction, Yi Xian would have thought it was just a dish. To be sure, it was not as simple as it was. System detect this thing. Yi Xian, unable to detect. Insufficient resources. Could it be that the system was talking about faith points? System, let's exchange resources for faith points detection. Ding. System notification. Insufficient resources. Unable to exchange for sufficient faith. Yi Xian stopped in his tracks. What does this mean? Even with all of his resources combined, it was still not enough to detect such a thing? What is this thing? Is it so strange? Yi Xian did not believe that he could not do anything to this thing. System, open that gift pack for me. Yi Xian had completed the Star Power mission and received a gift pack and a 9-star Pearl Stone. But he had not used it yet. At this moment, Yi Xian wanted to use a gift pack for a plate. Ding! System notification. The special gift pack has been successfully opened. Congratulations to the host for receiving a gift pack of points, a gift pack of magic treasures, and an unknown gift pack. What's going on? He opened a gift pack and then opened 3 gift packs? After Yi Xian was stunned, he was pleasantly surprised. Yi Xian didn't need to wash his hair to know about the gift pack. He would either give him Devourer points, Eternal points, or Faith points. But no matter what was given, one thing was certain, they were all good things. System, open the gift pack of points first. Yi Xian wanted to see what he could get. It would be best if he could get Eternal points. Although it had been a long time since he obtained Devourer points, Eternal points seemed to be more useful. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for obtaining 1 million Faith points, 100 Eternal points, and 10 Devourer points. Yi Xian was dumbfounded. He even felt that happiness came too suddenly. 1 million Faith points was not much, but the key was Eternal points. A full 100 Eternal points. This was simply something Yi Xian did not dare to imagine. What did 100 faith points mean? Even if he used Eternal Domain, he could use it 20 times. This time, just opening the gift pack once gave Yi Xian such a great prize. How could Yi Xian not be excited? 10 Devour points. It was unknown whether it was because of the increase in realm or because Yi Xian had been unlucky during this period, but Yi Xian had not encountered a Devourer for a long time, let alone obtain Devour points. But at this moment, he obtained 10 Devour points in one go. Combined with suitable resources, wouldn't Yi Xian be able to have a big change this time? Even Yi Xian could not stay calm at this moment. The reward of this gift pack was too generous. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Yi Xian continued to say to the system, "System, open the gift pack of magic treasures." The gift pack of magic treasures could obviously be opened. Then, if the gift pack of points gave Yi Xian such a big surprise, what kind of surprise would the gift pack of magic treasures give Yi Xian? Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a special scroll, Set Perfection Scroll. The Set Perfection Scroll can choose suitable resources according to the host's wishes and directly perfect a set of 2 or more parts that the host owns. Shock ecstasy. Yi Xian did not know how to describe his feelings at this moment. Although this was only a scroll, its value was immeasurable. Yi Xian now had the Godslayer sword and the Godslayer armor. Didn't this mean that Yi Xian could use this Set Perfection Scroll to complete the Godslayer set in one go? Although the resources were provided by Yi Xian himself, one had to know that compared to resources, it was much more difficult to create a set of magic treasures like the Godslayer set. In an instant, Yi Xian's hands, which were holding the scroll, trembled slightly. Unfortunately, when Yi Xian saw the materials used to create the Godslayer set, his expression turned ugly. Chapter 2475. The system was so shocked that it upgraded. Where was Yi Xian supposed to find such a thing? This was the God Emperor realm. What was the God Emperor realm? That was referring to Mi Ming, a God Master realm expert. The system actually wanted Yi Xian to find a God Master's Godhead, and 5 of them at that. Yi Xian had been in the God realm for so long, but he had only met 2 God Masters. One was the God Master of the Kunlun God Domain, Mi Ming, and the other was the God Master of the Yao God Domain. But creating a God-slaying set required 5 God Masters' Godheads, and complete ones at that. At this moment, Yi Xian put away the scroll without hesitation, because he knew that with his current strength, he couldn't gather all the materials. Of course, it was not possible now, but it did not mean that it would not be possible in the future. There was only one last gift bag left. As for this last gift bag, it was probably the most special gift bag. What kind of surprise could it bring to Yi Xian? System, open the unknown gift bag. Yi Xian said calmly, but his mind was completely focused. Ding! System notification. Ding! Warning, warning. The host has received a super strong reward. The system is undergoing an emergency upgrade. Ding! Warning, warning. The host, please take note. The system will be forcibly shut down for 3 months. Yi Xian had a dumbstruck expression on his face. What did he open up that directly upgraded the system? And it was an emergency upgrade. Yi Xian subconsciously shouted at the system several times, but there was no response. In other words, the system had really been upgraded. But Yi Xian didn't even know what he had done. Didn't he just open an unknown gift bag? Was there a need to make such a big fuss? Fortunately, it was only 3 months, so it wasn't unacceptable. This is great. This plate can't be used to find out what it's for. Forget it. I'll just leave it for now. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. This situation was completely out of his expectations. It was also something that Yi Xian had never encountered before. During these 3 months, Yi Xian did not intend to stir up any trouble. After all, without the system, Yi Xian's strength would still decrease. Most importantly, even if he killed an ancient beast or a mythical beast, he would not gain any experience points. In that case, killing them would be a waste of time. However, it was still necessary to hurry. Yi Xian was not prepared to look for trouble, but that did not mean that trouble would not look for Yi Xian. On this day, Yi Xian walked through the yellow sand as usual. Even though the yellow sand region was only the outermost region of the Drought Sea, it was still very dangerous. However, the Drought Sea was extremely vast. According to Tianhu, the Drought Sea occupied a fifth of the entire demon god domain. Such a large area, even if it was only his outer region, was not a place that could be traversed quickly. After all, they didn't even have a map here. Moreover, they would get lost from time to time. Whether it was divine telekinesis or eyes, they were useless in the yellow sand. The yellow sand had a strange restriction that was enough to cause anyone who entered to lose their sense of direction immediately. It was said that someone had been trapped in the yellow sand for 10,000 years. Furthermore, that person was lucky enough to not encounter any disasters in the yellow sand and thus survived. However, this time, Yixian didn't have such good luck. He encountered the most ordinary disaster in the yellow sand area, a law storm. Due to the special geographical location of the yellow sand, there were relatively few law powers in the yellow sand. However, there were a few law powers that were excessively abundant. Among them was the law of the wind. It could be said that the yellow sand was constantly windy at all times. However, it was not affected at all during normal times. After all, even the simplest protective divine power was enough to counteract these violent winds. However, it would be a tragedy if they encountered a law storm. A law storm was a natural phenomenon that occurred when the law of the wind was too concentrated in a certain area. Through the form of a storm, the law of the wind was eliminated. Even the law powers could be eliminated. One could only imagine how terrifying the power was. The formation of a law storm did not have the slightest sign. At this moment, Yixian was walking as usual. However, the moment he took a step forward, there was a sudden change in heaven and earth. A violent and terrifying aura overturned heaven and earth in an instant. Yixian did not have the slightest ability to resist and was directly lifted into the air. When he stabilized himself and looked over, it was already indistinguishable from heaven and earth. At this moment, Yixian seemed to have been brought into an unknown space. Above his head, below his feet, around his body, it was as if it was the sky and the earth. It was extremely strange. Boom! A divine dragon condensed from the law directly crashed toward Yixian. This was a pure law life form, and it was formed in an instant. However, before Yixian could react, the law divine dragon disintegrated in an instant. A law storm was not a real storm. The reason it was called a storm was because it had one thing in common with storms. They both had the eye of the storm. Fortunately, Yixian was now in the eye of the storm. Unfortunately, Yixian could not move an inch at this moment. He could only watch the terrifying changes in the outside world. Law life forms quickly appeared one after another. Law divine dragons, law divine tigers, and even law Kuan Pungs appeared. However, these law life forms did not last long from their appearance to their disappearance. This was because they were all wind law life forms. The main reason for the appearance of a law storm was because there were too many wind laws to repair. At this moment, Yixian was witnessing a miracle with his own eyes, a miracle that no one else would ever see in their lifetime. In the blink of an eye, the birth and death of a law life form was completed in an instant, and their appearance was not known to anyone other than Yixian. Perhaps Yixian's eyes were their only witness. Because Yixian, they had existed. At this moment, Yixian could not release his divine sense. Yixian tried, but just as he released a trace of his divine sense, it was immediately swept away by the law storm. Therefore, Yixian's eyes were the only witness. Witnessing all of this, these law life forms did not seem to know what they were experiencing. It was as if their lives were only meant to bloom for a moment. The law storm condensed the excess wind laws into wind law life forms, and then quickly destroyed them. Through this method, the excess nomological power was eliminated. However, this process was extremely natural. After all, this was the result of a natural balance, and it was in accordance with the laws of the Great Tao. Only Yixian, a witness, felt sorry for these law life forms. Yixian was a witness. He could see with his own eyes how these strange law life forms were born and how they died. Chapter 2476. Translator, Atlas Studios editor. Atlas Studios relics of the ancient god clan, it could be said that if they were not in this nomological storm and were in the outside world instead, they would be invincible. However, the crux of the matter was that they only obtained this power in an instant. Of course, their lives were only in an instant. Perhaps in their world, the power of time law was also involved and sped up their time immensely. Xianxia watched all this in silence. He could do nothing about it. Other than being a witness, Xianxia could not do anything else. It could be said that if Xianxia had not happened to be standing in the eye of the storm, he would have disappeared long ago. The nomological storm did not last long. When no nomological life forms appeared in the storm, the world finally started to return to normal. At the same time, the storm seemed to turn into an ordinary storm and then disappeared. Perhaps what they saw outside the nomological storm was just a very ordinary storm. For some reason, Xianxia thought of this sentence in his heart. A flower, a blade of grass, a world, a year, a life. At this moment, Xianxia seemed to realize many things. It could be said that he had witnessed everything in a single world. The life forms in the nomological storm might only think that this was their entire world. As for Xianxia, who had been standing there silently watching them, what was he in the eyes of these nomological life forms? God? As for their own strength, which one of them didn't surpass Xianxia? Stronger than most ordinary gods? Strength reigned supreme? However, in the nomological storm, that did not seem to be the case. Just because Xianxia was not on the same plane as these nomological life forms, there was a huge difference. Yes, it was a plane. The power of the plane's nomological laws. Unknowingly, Xianxia stood in place in a daze. The yellow sand was at a loss. Layer by layer, Xianxia was completely covered in yellow sand in a few days. Another few days later, this place was completely flat. As for Xianxia, he was nowhere to be seen because he had been buried by the yellow sand. At this moment, Xianxia had already fallen into deep thought. He pondered the power of the plane and the power of the planar laws. A faint shadow appeared above Xianxia's godhead. It could be said to be a single shadow, but it could also be said to be countless shadows. It was the power of the planar laws. Xianxia was enlightened. He had successfully comprehended the power of the planar laws. Furthermore, it was the true essence of the planar laws. Unfortunately, Xianxia was too weak, and his understanding was too shallow. Therefore, he could not activate the power of the planar laws. No one had ever comprehended the planar laws. At the very least, no one in the current god realm had ever done so. But this time, Xianxia had used the power of the law storm to comprehend a sliver of the planar laws. Even if it was only a trace, it was still a seed. As long as it was a seed, it could sprout. In the future, whether or not Xianxia could cultivate the planar laws would depend on himself. One had to know that the enlightenment, this time, was completely separate from the system. In other words, the power of the planar laws was completely the power of Xianxia himself. It was a power that was not controlled by the system, nor was it supervised by the system. Of course, at the same time, he would not receive any help from the system. 3 months later, a sound rang out. Ding! System upgrade successful. With this notification, Xianxia finally woke up. The system had finally recovered. Xianxia was overjoyed. He hurriedly asked the system, why did you suddenly upgrade this time? Xianxia had to get to the bottom of this question. After all, this had never happened before. Ding! System notification. Attention, host. The host has unlocked the Divinity Stripper Subprofession reward in advance. The system has been fully updated. The system actually did not answer Xianxia's question. It only told Xianxia about the reward. Forget it. The system often does this anyway. It's probably because I'm not strong enough. Xianxia did not think too much about it. He was too lazy to ask. Divinity Stripper. When he heard this reward, Xianxia was practically beside himself with joy. Back then, Xianxia had obtained a complete divinity. At that time, Xianxia knew that the Divinity Stripper had completely lost its inheritance. Perhaps Xianxia was the only Divinity Stripper left in the world. He just did not know if there were one or two divinity strippers in those special secret realms. The divinity stripper had the special ability to strip divinity against enemies who did not have a high mastery of the laws. The divinity stripper could be forcibly stripped without harming their lives. Against enemies of similar strength, the divinity stripper could be extracted after defeating them. There was a chance to strip a complete divinity stripper or obtain a divinity fragment. Against disciples who were stronger than the divinity stripper, the divinity stripper could be used to attack the opponent's divinity stripper. It could be said that the divinity stripper was a very powerful profession. Not only was its combat strength strong, but its attacking methods were also very strange. It was hard to defend against. Yixian did not hesitate and immediately chose to learn it. This time, Yixian did not bother to ask what the system had upgraded this time. What Yixian wanted to know the most now was what the disc was. System, can I use eternal points to detect this disc? Ding. System notification. The host is using eternal points to detect. This time, it will cost 10 eternal points. Does the host confirm? So expensive. Confirm. Ding. Congratulations to the host. You have obtained the special item, Ancient God Race's Divine Card Roulette. Ancient God Race. Yixian had heard of this race before. It was said that it was a powerful race in ancient times. However, it had gone extinct long ago. As for what legends they left behind, he did not know. Could it be that this ancient beast was related to the ancient god race? Otherwise, why would he find something of the ancient god race here? Well, now he knew what this thing was. Unfortunately, Yixian could not use this thing because Yixian did not know what this thing was for. Divine Card Roulette? Yixian did not even know what a divine card was, let alone a divine card roulette. It could be said that Yixian had already completely fallen into a daze. Each and every one of them had just entered the Drought Sea, yet they'd already encountered a few strange things. He really did not know what else he would encounter along the way. Of course, if there were more rewards like the Divinity Stripper subprofession, Yixian would not mind at all. At this time, Yixian put away his feelings and walked forward again. Yixian did not know what was waiting for Yixian. However, Yixian was sure that this time it would be extraordinary. The mysterious Drought Sea, the mysterious ancient beast, what kind of experience would Yixian bring? Step by step, Yixian kept moving forward. After the system upgrade, Yixian would no longer be trapped in the yellow sand area. Therefore, it did not take long for Yixian to walk out of the yellow sand area. However, what appeared in front of Yixian was a black area of withered rocks. Black, a boundless black. All of them were stones, stones of all kinds of strange shapes. Chapter 2477. Limerick, woo woo woo. The wind carried the sound of weeping. This was the sound of the wind, but it also sounded like sobbing. There were old people, children, men, and women crying. It was clearly just the sound of the wind, but there were all kinds of sounds. This showed that this was not an ordinary place. Yixian ignored all of this and continued to walk forward. Before long, Yixian saw a tea house in front of him. A divine beast with spikes all over its body and an incomplete form was holding a teapot and serving tea to a customer. The tea was fragrant, but it also carried the smell of blood. It was already extraordinary that such a tea house would appear in such a strange place. However, Yixian still walked towards the tea house. "Sir, what would you like to drink?" The divine beast carried the teapot to Yixian's side and asked Yixian. If it weren't for the special environment here, his words and actions would be no different from a waiter in an ordinary tea house. But if it was a trap, such an obvious trap was a little illogical. So at this moment, Yixian's heart was filled with countless doubts, but he did not ask. "A pot of tea." Yixian looked at the divine beast and said casually. The divine beast did not say anything else, but turned and left. Before long, it returned with a pot of tea. "Sir, this is your return tea. After drinking this pot of return tea, you can turn around and go back." Yixian was slightly taken aback. This divine beast was actually asking him to leave? What if I still want to go in? How you choose is your own decision. I am powerless to stop you. But if you really must go, then drink all the tea, not leaving a single drop behind. Leave a soul? Leave a soul. leave a trace of a soul. The soul is not destroyed. The spirit remains. The cycle of thousands of years. The road ahead is difficult. The road ahead cannot be held back. The divine beast was actually reciting a limerick. Unfortunately, Xian did not understand what it meant. It was only when Xian saw the customers around him that he understood. System, detect this waiter. Ding. System notification. The target is a trace of the soul, not a living thing. So this was a soul retention tea house. The meaning of leaving a soul was very simple. It was to keep the soul. Some forces had special abilities. Through special abilities and special magic treasures, when a person wanted to do something they were not confident in, they would use special means to leave behind a strand of their soul. The advantage of this was that if he really did die, then as long as there was a trace of his soul, there would be a chance for him to be revived. This sort of method could not be considered as a commonly used method. After all, on the path of cultivation, it could be said that one could die at any moment. However, some important figures of the factions were used to leave a soul retention tea house. At the most crucial moment, through this soul, it was equivalent to having a second life. Here, there was a soul retention tea house. He didn't know who opened it and why it was opened here. Looking at the customers who were silently drinking tea, it was likely that they had repeated this action countless times. This was because they were only a strand of remnant soul. Without the help of external forces, it was impossible for them to rely on a strand of remnant soul to be revived. Who was it that built such a place? What was the purpose of her building this place? This was the Drought Sea, the habitat of the ancient beasts. Could it be that all the divine beast masters of the demon god domain had built this place because they wanted to exterminate the ancient beasts in the Drought Sea? Maybe it was possible, but what about the yellow sand zone? And what about the waiter? Why couldn't he stay? Listening to his tone, it seemed like he wanted to keep something. Was it to keep someone like Xian, who was trying to enter the Drought Sea? Xian did not know. He had no place to find out. At this moment, Xian had thousands of questions, but he could only keep them to himself. No one could answer for him. This teapot was a treasure because the tea inside could condense on its own. However, Xian did not take it away. Leaving it here might be the right place for this teapot. Xian did not drink the soul retention tea house. He continued on his way. After leaving the soul retention tea house, Xian knew that he had set foot on the path of the ancients. Perhaps someone had walked this path before and hunted ancient beasts through this place. He walked for a full 7 days. Xian had thought of flying through the air to increase his speed. Unfortunately, the idea was beautiful, but reality was cruel. The sky was a path that could not be taken. Perhaps it was because this place was close to the yellow sand zone, or because there was a serious overabundance of laws here. But in any case, there would be nomological beings floating through the sky from time to time. They were extremely fast, disappearing in a flash. If it were anyone else, they might think that these nomological beings were just passing by. However, Xian, who had experienced the nomological storm, knew that this was the entire course of their lives. There was a strange energy in the sky. It was a nomological power that Xian had never seen before, nor could he sense. The sky was extremely empty. Just from this, Xian could tell that the sky was more dangerous than the ground. That was why Xian did not choose to fly through the sky. At this moment, Xian was no longer in a monotonous black. Instead, he could see buildings. Seeing buildings meant that danger was approaching, because this was undoubtedly equivalent to entering the Drought Sea. And these buildings were undoubtedly built by ancient beasts. The architectural style of ancient beasts was different from that of the divine tribe of the Kunlun divine domain and the beast tribe of the demon god divine domain. These buildings were filled with a sense of ancientness. Each building was not only huge, but also very rough. At this moment, in front of Xian did not know what these buildings were used for because they did not have any signs. These buildings seemed to be made from the skin and bones of some giant beast. Ancient beasts did not have much intelligence. To be able to achieve such a level was already commendable. Moreover, these buildings did not have the slightest aura of an array. In other words, these buildings were unguarded. Xian observed the buildings from afar. Logically speaking, if there were people in the buildings, they should have discovered Xian long ago. However, Xian had not been discovered until now. There was only one possibility. This was an abandoned building. Xian slowly walked forward towards the buildings. Not long after, he arrived at the door. Indeed, it was wild enough. Perhaps only ancient beasts would have this kind of architectural style. The walls were made of animal skin, but the ancient beast had drawn strange patterns on them. Chapter 2478. Translator, Audiobook, Studio Editor. Audiobook, Studio. Against the ancient beast, Xian walked through the hall, feeling the ancient aura. There was no divine power here, no power of laws. There was only the purest and most primitive aura. Xian looked like he was admiring a work of art. Sometimes, however, danger would strike when you least expect it. At this moment, Xian wasn't on guard, and this attack was abnormally sudden. Boom! Suddenly, a huge force came crashing down on him. It was a pure and primitive power, but because it was so strong, it triggered the cooperation of some of the laws. The ancient beast clan. Xian retreated quickly. A huge crater had been left where he had been standing. A figure appeared. Of course, it was not a person, but a strange ancient beast. Who are you? The person's voice was very stiff. It was obvious that he did not speak often. Moreover, his words were toneless. Didn't they say that ancient beasts did not have any intelligence? Didn't they say that the ancient beast clan was a barbaric existence? Why could this ancient beast speak human language? Xian was puzzled. He immediately said to the system, "System, detect this guy. I want to see if he is an ancient beast." Ding. System notification. Detection successful. Target specified. Ancient beast clan member. Special ability. Physical enhancement. Ancient beast transformation. So, this was not his original form. It seemed that this ancient beast had made some progress after interacting with the divine beasts of the demon god domain for so many years. Moreover, it was obvious that the divine beasts of the demon god domain had given up on managing this place. But the ancient beast had sent their clansmen out to secretly learn, who said that the ancient beasts were barbaric and ignorant. In Xian's opinion, the ancient beast clan was not as barbaric as he had thought. They even had the transfiguration divine power, although they had only learned a little. He did not know whether the entire ancient beast clan was like this, or whether Xian had encountered a special case. Before Xian could reply, he heard the ancient beast say, "Those who enter will die." After saying that, the ancient beast suddenly ran towards Xian. He clearly wasn't using any divine power or law power, but when this guy ran, he wasn't much slower than Xian. Die. Boom. The ancient beast abruptly threw a punch, and a power that could topple mountains and overturn seas was instantly unleashed. With his attack as the epicenter, everything within a radius of 10,000 kilometers was instantly reduced to nothingness. At this moment, even Xian had to admit that this ancient beast had its own special abilities when it came to body refinement. One had to know that even Xian, with the support of the system, would not be able to cause such a huge amount of damage, even if he unleashed his full strength. This ancient beast's strength was so great that it actually resonated with the laws. Generally speaking, after people comprehended the laws, they would take the initiative to guide the power of the laws for their own use, turning it into a means of attack. However, the ancient beasts were not like that. Their attacks were actually based on the strength of their physical bodies. They directly drove the laws and made the laws cooperate with their actions. It could be said that in terms of the utilization of the laws, this ancient beast's actions were very wasteful. However, to drive the laws with one's physical body was already considered a miracle. At this moment, Xian was still in the mood to observe the ancient beast's battle style. However, when the ancient beast attacked again, Xian was no longer in the mood to observe. "Get out, outsider." At this moment, the ancient beast was speaking in human language while transforming into its true form. When the ancient beast's true form was revealed, Xian finally realized how huge It was. It was more than 10 meters tall, and its entire body was filled with firm muscles. The ancient beast casually pulled out a bone from the side and used it as a weapon. Boom! Boom! 2 consecutive frenzied attacks forced Xian to continuously retreat. The entire ground was destroyed by the ancient beast's frenzied attacks, as if a violent earthquake had occurred. Every time he attacked, a ray of light would naturally condense on the beast bone. It was the power of the laws that had been restrained. It was extremely fast and powerful. Wei Jinqian, kill it for me. Finally, Xian had seen enough of the ancient beast's performance and finally made his move. 2 Godslayer swords appeared in an instant and attacked the ancient beast directly. However, what happened next left Xian in disbelief. The 2 God-slaying swords hit the ancient beast without any resistance. However, the invincible God-slaying swords did not kill the ancient beast. Instead, with a bang, the 2 God-slaying swords were sent flying away. How is this possible? This was the first time Xian had encountered such a situation. It was simply too shocking for Xian. Damn it! I don't believe that I can't do anything to you. Wei Jinqian, continue attacking. Xian suddenly took out his Rule Divine Bow. As he ordered Wei Jinqian to continue controlling the 2 God-slayer swords to attack, he also pulled on the Rule Divine Bow. Augment of Gravity Law. Xian used the Gravity Law once. Wasn't the ancient beast's physical body strong? Then, let's see if it could withstand the Gravity Law's attack. Boom! The first Gravity Law Divine arrow hit the ancient beast directly. Unfortunately, it only made the ancient beast take a few steps back. The second Gravity Divine arrow was even worse. It was sent flying by the ancient beast's bone club. Such strength! Xian was convinced. The ancient beast's strength was simply shocking. Even a divine arrow supported by the law of gravity could be sent flying. Just how strong was this guy? However, would Xian give up just like that? Obviously, it was impossible. Augment of Devouring Law. This time, Xian shot 3 divine arrows at the same time. All 3 divine arrows were augmented with the power of the Devouring Law, trying to use physical strength to resist the power of the laws. How could it be that simple? Boom! The ancient beast used the bone club in its hand to smash one of the divine arrows. It thought that would be sent flying like the previous time. Unfortunately, this time, the divine arrow was smashed into a huge vortex. The violent devouring law was instantly activated. The ancient beast lost its grip on the bone club in its hand and was sucked away by the vortex. It was directly devoured. However, the ancient beast's body did not suffer too much damage. It could not even pull him away. Fortunately, at this time, the other 2 ruled divine arrows had flown over. In an instant, 2 more vortexes appeared beside the ancient beast. If it were anyone else facing the attack of 3 rule vortexes, they would have either fled or been killed. Even if they were lucky enough to survive, they would not have it any easier than the ancient beast. Chapter 2479. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio Map Fragment. Did this guy have to be so strong? Xian frowned. With a wave of his hand, he released a divine ability. Absolute Zero. In an instant, the ancient beast was frozen to the spot. Kill him for me. With Xian's order, he released the divine wood sword attendants. The divine wood sword servants attacked the ancient beast with the 2 god-slaying swords. Unfortunately, the more Xian watched, the tighter his frown became. Because no matter whether it was the divine wood sword servants or the attacks of the 2 god-slaying swords, to that guy, they simply could not cause any decent damage. It was as if the god-slaying swords had become a blunt, worn knife in front of the ancient beast. Xian's frown deepened, but he was thinking quickly. Suddenly, he thought of a feasible plan. The ancient beast's body was so strong that even the god-slaying swords could not do anything to it. What about their divine consciousness? Xian wanted to try. Xian did not believe that the ancient beast was not afraid of divine consciousness attacks. A solid divine consciousness sword suddenly formed. Following Xian's thought, the divine consciousness sword attacked the ancient beast. silent and undetectable. Spiritual force attacks were silent in the first place. As for the ancient beast, it also stopped moving at this moment. This guy with such a strong body did not cultivate divine consciousness at all. Therefore, Yixian killed him with just one divine consciousness attack. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for killing a border soldier of the Ancient Beast clan. You have obtained a map fragment of the Drought Sea. A map. This is a good thing. No matter where one went, a map was undoubtedly the most useful thing. However, the ancient beast that Yixian had killed with great difficulty was just a border soldier. At this moment, Yixian did not hold much hope for this trip to the Drought Sea. A border soldier had almost rendered Yixian helpless. If he encountered a general or something like that, wouldn't Yixian be invincible? With a wave of his hand, Yixian swallowed the ancient beast's corpse. This time, Yixian's main purpose in entering the Drought Sea was to increase his cultivation level. Naturally, he would not be the same as before. Occasionally, he would hoard resources and wait for the right time to devour them. This time, Yixian would devour all of the enemies he killed on the spot. The map fragment could not show the entire Drought Sea. Furthermore, it could not show Yixian's location. Hence, Yixian could only keep the map for now. After killing the ancient beast's corpse, Yixian, as they entered corpse, the ancient beast clan. Unlike what Yixian thought, this place was not only inhabited by ancient beasts. In fact, there were many other clans living here. These clans were exceptionally strong. Perhaps they were influenced by the ancient beasts, or perhaps it was because of the environment here, but in any case, the other clans here mainly cultivated their physical bodies. Ding! System notification. Attention host, a special plant has been detected, the ancient seven-feather tree. It is recommended that the host collect it immediately. The ancient seven-feather tree was named after its feather-like fruits. Each time it bore 7 fruits, there would only be 7 of them. The ancient seven-feather tree's fruits had a very special ability. After eating them, the person who consumed them would lose weight rapidly. Even if one lost weight, it wouldn't affect one's strength. That was why the ancient seven-feather tree had become a treasure of the ancient beasts. Almost every member of the ancient beasts would consume one on their coming-of-age ceremony. After all, without consuming the ancient seven-feather tree's magical fruits, the ancient beasts would not be able to move so quickly with their physique. After receiving the system notification, Yixian immediately focused his attention in that direction. Sure enough, there was an ancient tree growing in front of him. The 7 feather-like things on the tree were the fruits. However, at this moment, there were 4 ancient beast soldiers guarding the tree. In addition, there was a strange mythical beast. Yixian only knew that this mythical beast was raised in captivity by the ancient beasts, but he had no idea what its abilities were. If he wanted to obtain the 7-feather tree, he would have to defeat these 5 guys. Yixian released his divine telekinesis and observed carefully. He found that the 4 ancient beasts were guarding one side of the tree. They did not leave at all. It seemed that he had to force his way in. Kill! Yixian roared and rushed forward. At the same time, the 5 ancient beasts attacked with their divine telekinesis. Aowu! The sudden attack caused the 4 ancient beasts to panic. However, this time, Yixian's divine telekinesis attack did not kill the ancient beasts. Just as Yixian was puzzled, he found that the mythical beast that was patrolling the area was emitting a strange energy that protected the 4 ancient beasts. The divine telekinesis attack was blocked. What kind of power was this? Yixian had seen many methods that could shield his spiritual sense, but the method that the ancient beast used to shield his spiritual sense was something that Yixian had never seen before. It seemed to be an ancient beast's divine telekinesis, but it did not seem to be. System detect that guy's method. Right now, Yixian's detection consumed faith points, so Yixian didn't have a lot of faith points left. However, he still had to use what he needed. Ding! System notification. The target is using pulsating demon ability. Pulsating demon ability? Yixian frowned. This was a new ability that he had never heard of before. Pulsating demon ability used one's meridians as storage points and one's body as the foundation to create a special array. This kind of energy was unique to ancient beasts and was even more advanced than divine telekinesis attacks. This was because divine telekinesis could only be stored in one's mind, so there was a limit to how much it could be stored. No matter how much one cultivated, it could only be considered as continuously purifying the strength of one's divine telekinesis. However, it could not increase the total amount of divine telekinesis. However, pulsating demon ability was different. Pulsating demon ability could use all of one's meridians and meridians as storage points. Naturally, it could store more energy. Unfortunately, Yixian did not know how to use this method. Yixian was a little tempted. If he could master this method, wouldn't he be able to store his divine telekinesis separately in his meridians? If that was the case, then the total amount of Yixian's divine telekinesis would skyrocket. If that was the case, Yixian could only imagine the benefits. Divine Wood Sword Servants, go stop that guy for me. Yixian waved his hand and summoned the divine Wood Sword Servants. Then, he ordered them to stop that special mythical beast. Chapter 2480. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Big Tree, the ancient Beast Clan's realm division, was different from ordinary realms. Because they cultivated their bodies, even Yixian wasn't able to obtain an accurate division of their strength. He could only estimate their strength based on their status. Fortunately, the ancient beast's strength lay in their physical bodies. No matter how strong they were, they could not truly contend with Yixian. Yixian held the Godslayer in his hand. This time, he did not let Wei Zhentian control the Godslayer. Yixian knew full well that the Godslayer alone would not be able to break through the ancient beast's defenses. Rather than that, he might as well use his own attacks. After all, the critical strike rate of his attacks would greatly increase, and he would also have a chance to trigger a one-hit kill. Ever since Wei Zhentian had become the weapon spirit of the Godslayer and gained the form of the Godslayer, Yixian had not personally controlled the Godslayer in battle for a long time. Deicide slash. He suddenly slashed with the sword. A boom was heard, and one of the ancient beasts was sent flying by the sword. Yixian did not stop there. With the Godslayer in hand, he immediately chased after the ancient beasts. The ancient beasts' attack and defense were not weak. They were also very agile. However, they only relied on their physical strength and did not use any special abilities. As a result, they were not much of a threat to Yixian. It could be said that the most important thing for Yixian to deal with the ancient beasts was patience. He had to find a way to wear his opponent down. He did not need to use too much explosive power. Unlike any of the enemies Yixian had encountered before, if he wanted to kill the ancient beast clan, it was impossible for him to expect to be able to do so in a single burst of power. Six-syllable mantra die. Yixian activated the six-syllable mantra, hoping to use the mysterious power of the six-syllable mantra to kill his enemy. However, this time, Yixian failed. This damned ancient beasts actually ignored the power of the six-syllable mantra. Deicide slash. Helpless, Yixian swung his sword again, forcing the ancient beast clan member to retreat. Then he gathered all of his divine sense and released a divine sense sword. The ancient beast that had been suppressed by Yixian finally showed a pained expression. It was obvious that the full power of Yixian's spiritual force attack had broken through his defense. Ayo! What Yixian did not expect was that the mythical beast was also crying out in pain. The mythical beast's mana pulse could actually help the ancient beasts withstand damage. Seeing the pained expression on the divine beast's face, Yixian's mind moved in an instant. He immediately gave up on attacking the ancient beast in front of him and joined hands with the divine wood sword attendant to directly launch a powerful attack on the divine beast. It didn't take long for Yixian to kill the divine beast. After that, it was easy for him to kill the four ancient beasts. After clearing out the guards, Yixian finally came to the seven-feathered tree as he wished. With a casual wave of his hand, the seven-feather tree was uprooted by Yixian without any ability to resist and directly absorbed into the devouring space. This was because Xian wanted to see if he could grow such a magical plant in the devouring space. Xian originally thought that it would take some effort to grow the seven-feathered tree. However, to Xian's surprise, the seven-feathered tree's vitality was unusually strong. It was not affected by the environment at all. Even after transplanting it into the devouring space, it adapted quickly. With a wave of his hand, the 5 ancient beast corpses on the ground were devoured by Xian and turned into experience points for leveling up. Ding! System notification. Host has broken through to superior rank 5 Divine Emperor Realm. Xian could see that in the Drought Sea, one's cultivation level was not so important. This was because the ancient beast's fighting style was completely different. The difference in cultivation level would greatly reduce the suppression of the ancient beasts. Of course, the higher one's cultivation level was, the more advantage one would have. With the Godslayer in hand, Xian walked forward. The Drought Sea was enormous. There was still a long way to go before Xian could reach it. Originally, Xian only wanted to kill ancient beasts here to increase his cultivation level. However, it seemed that there were some things in the Drought Sea that could be kept in the devouring space. This was because there were many things in the Drought Sea that did not exist in the outside world. There were even some rare races among them. These rare races had their own unique characteristics. It just so happened that Xian could take them all. It was almost impossible to find such a dense collection of rare races in the outside world. However, there were many rare races in the Drought Sea. After all, the Drought Sea was already considered a rare place. There was probably no other Drought Sea in the entire realm of the gods. Moreover, if Xian continued killing, it would not be long before the ancient beast became a rare race as well. It was a tree, an incomparably huge and strangely shaped tree. Xian raised his head and looked at the tree in the sky. For a moment, he was stunned. Not long ago, Xian noticed something in the sky and rushed over. When he arrived, he saw this strange tree. Actually, just by looking at the tree's appearance, it looked like an ordinary banyan tree in the realm of the gods. It was not surprising that it had not cultivated any intelligence. However, if one looked at the nutrients it was absorbing, one would not think so. Almost all of the tree was floating in the air. Its thick roots were scattered all over the sky. These roots had several different forms. The most common one was translucent. These roots were densely packed in the air. They were constantly refining the wandering divine power in the surroundings into nourishment. Next were the roots that were as white as jade. It was hard to imagine that these roots were actually refining the power of laws to become nutrients for the tree. It could even devour the power of laws. If one were to say that this tree was simple, they would be stupid. The tree was enormous. Standing on the ground, Xian felt like he was not looking at a tree, but a mountain. Moreover, it was an enormous mountain. Xian was already thinking. Although Xian had not figured out what this tree was for, it would not stop Xian from wanting to absorb it into the devouring space. With divine power and the power of laws as nutrients, this tree must have some mysterious power. Devour. Xian did not think too much about it. He treated this tree like the plants he had encountered before and tried to absorb it directly. However, this time he failed. It was not a complete failure. This was because after Xian activated his devouring ability, one of the roots was absorbed into the devouring space. Xian was slightly stunned. He could sense from the devouring space that the roots were constantly absorbing the power of the devouring space to feed the tree. Xian raised an eyebrow. Chapter 2481. Strange again and again devour. This time, Xian increased his devouring power in an attempt to grab the tree. However, Xian failed once. Apart from letting more roots enter the devouring space and continuously absorbing energy to feed the tree, Xian gained nothing. Damn it! If Xian did not solve this problem, Xian's devouring space would become the tree's source of energy, and it would be an endless source of energy. In that case, how exactly would he be able to take this tree away? Even the laws were just nourishment for the tree. Xian could not think of any other methods. Suddenly, Yi Xian's eyes lit up. He thought of a type of energy that Yi Xian had just obtained. Because just a moment ago, Yi Xian discovered that at this moment, the strange tree had a faint star energy surrounding it. Moreover, while the tree was extremely afraid of astral energy, it would also think of ways to extract it. Since that was the case, why didn't Yi Xian use the astral energy as bait? Yi Xian's hands continuously condensed strands of astral energy, which were all stored in Yi Xian's devouring space. Yi Xian's idea was very simple. He wanted to use the astral energy as bait to lure the tree and then subdue it. This ancient tree was obviously not as brainless as imagined. It should have some basic consciousness. Since it had some basic consciousness, it was a good thing for Yi Xian. This way, using the astral energy as bait would increase his chances of success. Yi Xian did not have much astral energy, so it was only a fist-sized piece in the devouring space. The fist-sized piece of astral energy constantly emitted a resplendent glow. It was very dazzling. Yi Xian activated his devouring power again in an attempt to subdue the ancient tree. Devour. This was his third attempt. If it did not succeed, Yi Xian would have no choice but to give up. A strong suction force was activated, but the tree remained unmoved. Could it be that Yi Xian had failed again? Suddenly, a tentacle appeared around the ball of astral energy in the devouring space. Then, more and more tentacles began to gather around the ball of light. There was movement. As long as there was movement, it was a good thing. Yi Xian waited silently. Indeed, after a while, the tree's tentacles outside dwindled, and all of them gathered around the ball of astral energy. A moment later, the large tree disappeared. As for Yi Xian's devouring space, there was an additional large tree. Actually, it was not a good feeling because Yi Xian did not take the tree away, but Yi Xian, the tree, had entered the devouring space itself. In other words, from beginning to end, Yi Xian was unable to do anything to this tree. But no matter what, as long as the tree was absorbed into the devouring space, it was undoubtedly a good thing. After the tree entered the devouring space, Yi Xian could clearly feel the benefits of the tree. Yi Xian did not know how many tentacles the tree had. This was because just like when Yi Xian had forcefully subdued him in the beginning, only a few roots had entered the devouring space. The roots of this big tree were actually spread throughout many places. In various parts of the divine realm continent, in some secret realms, there might be roots of that big tree. However, as long as the tree's main body was in the devouring space, then the benefits would naturally flow to the devouring space. The tree used divine power and the power of laws as nutrients, but what it emitted was the power of life. This power of life was extremely strong and dispersed directly into the air. In other words, the entire devouring space would benefit. However, there was only one tree, so the benefits would be much less. Yi Xian seemed to understand why the ancient beasts in the Drought Sea had such strong vitality. Because of the existence of these ancient trees, they constantly converted divine power and the power of laws into vitality. Therefore, it was many times more difficult to cultivate in the Drought Sea than in the outside world. However, the vitality here was unusually strong, so much so that the ancient beasts did not even need to cultivate. Just by breathing, they would naturally be strengthened by the boundless vitality. If possible, Yi Xian naturally wanted to collect more of these trees. There were many mysteries in the Drought Sea, but this was only the beginning. Yi Xian was like a fish in water in the Drought Sea. On one hand, he could kill the ancient beasts to increase his strength, and on the other, he could collect all kinds of strange items. It was quite interesting. System, what is this? After subduing the tree, Yi Xian did not have time to leave before he saw a strange divine beast running towards him. This divine beast was not considered ugly. The reason why he was called strange was because there was a flower growing out of this fellow's head. There were many bright and beautiful flowers. A divine beast with a flower growing on its head? Then was it a beast or a plant? Yi Xian watched curiously as the divine beast ran. It seemed to be looking for something. Ding! System notification. Rare species detected. Divine flower beast. It is recommended that the host capture it immediately. There is no rush. System. What is up with this divine flower beast? Why is it half animal and half plant? Ding. System notification. The divine flower beast has a special ability, Plant Psychic. This ability allows the divine flower beast to transform into any flower and live on a plant. Xianxia was stunned. An animal living on a plant? This was unheard of. Could it be that this guy was like a plant and could use sunlight as nourishment to cultivate? Ding. System notification. The divine flower beast has a special ability, Form Imitation. Once activated, it can perfectly merge itself with the plant and allow the plant to share its energy with it. Xianxia did not know whether to laugh or cry. Meeting such a strange creature, Xianxia was speechless. This guy really did rely on plants to feed itself. However, this method of survival was quite unique. Xianxia could guess what this guy was looking for. He was probably looking for that big tree from before. Perhaps this guy had been living on that big tree all this time. Since this was a rare species, Xianxia took it into his devouring space. He placed it around the tree. Sure enough, just as Xianxia had expected, when the flower god beast saw the tree, it revealed an excited expression. It leaped up and jumped high onto the tree. In the blink of an eye, the divine flower beast had completely disappeared. It had completely merged with the tree. No one would be able to detect any abnormality at all. The more Xianxia looked at it, the more he found it interesting. This divine flower beast was quite special. Chapter 2482. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Cage of Precepts. The reason why Xianxia hadn't encountered too much danger along the way was because it was still considered an outer area, so the ancient beast clan wasn't on guard against it. As Xianxia ventured deeper, the ancient beast defenses became tighter and tighter. More and more creatures belonging to the Drought Sea began to appear. What kind of divine beast is this? Xianxia looked at the scene in front of him strangely. He could not understand what was going on. The divine beast's body shone with a metallic light, and its back was full of long thorns like swords. Suddenly, the divine beast fixed its gaze on Xianxia. Obviously, it had noticed Xianxia and was hostile to Xianxia. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Several beams of cold light suddenly flew out from the divine beast's back. In the blink of an eye, they were already attacking Xianxia. Wei Zhentian flew out without hesitation and rushed toward the cold light. The light flashed, and after a while, several broken swords fell to the ground. However, this was just the beginning. Just as the broken swords fell, thousands of cold lights appeared again and rushed toward Xianxia. The two god-slaying swords blocked Xianxia's front, preventing the cold lights from getting close to Xianxia. However, Xianxia was very confused. What was this divine beast? Ding! System notification. Target set, Sword Forging Beast. The Sword Forging Beast was formed from the divine sword forging furnace left behind by the ancient sword forging master. Its original form was only a sword forging furnace, but it was formed by chance. The Sword Forging Beast's special ability was to forge swords to attack. The Sword Forging Beast could quickly forge all kinds of divine swords within its body to attack. The quality of the divine swords was randomly determined. At the same time, if the attack failed, the divine swords would automatically be retrieved. At the same time that he heard the system notification, Xianxia clearly saw the scene of the divine sword being retracted. He saw the broken swords on the ground turn into streams of light and fly back to the divine beast side. What a sword forging beast! With its special ability, it could be said that it could do whatever it wanted in the Drought Sea. Unfortunately, its opponent was Xianxia. Although the sword forging beast's body structure compared to the beast's, it could not make Xianxia helpless. Xianxia saw Xianxia quickly took out the divine bow of law, then pulled the bowstring without hesitation. The puppet's power. Xianxia was Xianxia's. Was he Xianxia? The sword forging beast translation of the translation. Translation, translation, Fong's translation, 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 as on translation, 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 as translation. Although the sword-casting beast had a certain chance of failure when refining the divine sword, even a weapon refiner had a chance of failure when refining a magic treasure. Yixian might not need it himself, but if he brought the sword-forging beast back to the Jiufeng 60,000 mirror of the Kunlun God domain, he might be able to get a good result. Of course, it would be difficult to tame the sword-forging beast just by using the puppet's power. 7 divine arrows of law descended beside the sword-forging beast at the same time. Not all of the divine arrows of law were divine runes, but 4 of them contained the power of divine runes. These 4 divine runes formed an inescapable net, trapping the sword-forging beast in a cage of law in an instant. As for the other 3 laws, they formed a chain that spanned across the sky and reinforced the cage once again. Bang, bang, bang. Crisp sounds came from the cage. The divine beast of law was struggling, trying to escape. Clang, clang, clang. The law cage trembled in mid-air from the impact, and a crack actually appeared on it. Yixian immediately drew his bow, and several divine arrows of law flew out, strengthening the cage again. Bastard, if you submit to me today, I can spare your life. If you don't submit, don't blame me for tearing you to pieces. Yixian roared. The sword-forging beast was a divine beast that had gained sentience, so Yixian believed that the sword-forging beast could understand him. Roar. The sword-forging beast roared in response to Yixian with its anger. Huge power kept crashing into the cage of law. After the crazy sword-forging beast knew Yixian's intention, it became even crazier and struggled even harder. You don't submit, right? Today, I'll beat you until you submit. The sword-forging beast did not have any divine runes, so Yixian was not worried that it could break out of the cage of law. Yixian drew his divine bow of law again, and all kinds of violent divine runes flew out from the divine arrows of law. Ferocious attacks filled the inside of the law cage with all kinds of terrifying power. Roar! The sword-forging beast let out a tragic cry, but Yixian was unmoved. He did not put away the divine bow of law in his hand. Instead, he casually threw Absolute Zero. Absolute Zero could not trap the sword-forging beast for too long, but even if it was just a blink of an eye, it was enough for Yixian to do a lot of things and launch countless powerful attacks. Do you submit? Yixian asked loudly, but the sword-forging beast did not show any other reaction besides roaring. If you don't submit, then continue to endure. 6 syllables of truth cripple. With Yixian's roar, a mysterious power was immediately activated. The sword-forging beast paused for a moment, but because of its strong physical body, it was not really crippled. Still, it was slightly injured. The sword-forging beast finally showed fear in its eyes. After all, Yixian had injured it with just 1 sentence and no other action. How could it not be shocked? The sword-forging beast was not stupid, but it was transformed from a sword-forging cauldron, so it would not be too resistant to submit to an expert. But after all, the sword-forging beast had long been used to being at ease after thousands of years. If someone suddenly wanted to subdue it, it would naturally resist. At this moment, the sword-forging beast was in a daze, but its anger had decreased by a lot. Yixian did not know this. Seeing that the sword-forging beast still had no intention of submitting, Yixian launched another attack. Divine Telekinesis Suppression. This time, Yixian directly used the power of his divine telekinesis. No matter how powerful the sword-forging beast was, it had only cultivated for a short time and could not possibly possess a strong divine telekinesis. After all, the sword-forging beast lived in the Drought Sea. Where could it find a cultivation method? The strong divine telekinesis suppression descended on the sword-forging beast. At the same time, Yixian's voice sounded. Do you submit? Roar. Chapter 2483. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios subduing the sword-forged beast. Yixian's divine telekinesis increased in intensity. Are you still not convinced? This time, the divine telekinesis pressure was almost tangible, Furthermore, Yi Xian had even added in his killing intent. Yi Xian's patience was running out. He was on the verge of dying. I'll give you one last chance. Submit or die. Boom. The Swordforged beast finally gave in under the divine telekinesis pressure. It knelt on the ground. At the same time, a divine telekinesis sword hovered above the Swordforged beast's head. At the same time, the nomological mystical arrows in Yi Xian's hands flashed. The two god-slaying swords were ready to strike at any time. It was obvious that Yi Xian was ready to kill. If the Swordforged beast did not submit, he would have no choice. Yi Xian did not speak. He waited silently. Yi Xian could not make the Swordforged beast's decision. However, Yi Xian had given a chance. If it was stubborn, Yi Xian would not mind devouring it. However, the Swordforged beast was not stupid. After realizing that it had no choice, the Swordforged beast no longer hesitated. It sent its quintessence shard out of the cage. The quintessence shard glowed faintly and slowly floated toward Yi Xian. Yi Xian smirked. With a wave of his hand, he collected the quintessence shard. At the same time, all the attacks aimed at the Swordforged beast disappeared. Master! Master! A voice entered the Swordforged beast's mind. However, this voice sounded somewhat immature. It turned out that although the Swordforged beast had lived for tens of millions of years, it had only cultivated for the last 100,000 years. It had only developed sentience recently. After all, it was only a Swordforged cauldron. It was not that easy for it to develop sentience. Since you're a Swordforged cauldron, I'll call you Lil Cauldron. Lil Cauldron, you grew up here. Is there anything special about this place? Yi Xian asked the sword-forging beast. This was because Yi Xian felt that since it was said that this was a place left behind by an ancient expert to forge swords, there might be something else. Master, this place has long since been abandoned. Most of the things have disappeared. However, the original master left behind a sealed place. Perhaps there are some special existences there. The original owner was that ancient almighty being. Since that was the case, there might really be a fortuitous encounter inside. All right, take me there immediately, Yi Xian said to the sword-forging beast without hesitation. The sword-forging beast led Yi Xian towards a large mountain. On the surface, there was nothing special about this mountain. However, as the sword-forging beast led the way, Yi Xian discovered that there was actually a hidden restriction here. Yi Xian had never seen this kind of restriction before. Clearly, it was a technique from the distant past. The sword-forging beast led Yi Xian according to a certain walking pattern. It would either advance or retreat, left or right. Sometimes it would even walk on the spot. However, the strange thing was that the scenery in front of Yi Xian was changing. Master, this is my home. There is a strange restriction here. It's a little like overlapping space. If you walk according to the specific walking pattern, you will be able to walk home. However, if you make a single mistake, you will be immediately pushed out. Yi Xian nodded. Although Yi Xian had never seen this kind of technique before, Yi Xian had seen something similar. That was overlapping space. Perhaps this place was like that too. Yi Xian followed the sword-forging beast's footsteps. It could be said that every step was very careful. There was not the slightest mistake. Finally, after walking for a full hour, the scenery in front of Yi Xian suddenly changed. The top of a mountain. This was the top of a huge mountain. Moreover, the top of this mountain had clearly been shaved off by someone. However, the top was not really non-existent. Instead, it was suspended not far away, forming a floating island. Yi Xian carefully observed for a moment, only to discover that the mountain beneath his feet, along with the floating island, wasn't it the mountain he saw before? If not for the sword-forging beast leading the way, even if Yi Xian climbed to the top of the mountain, he would not be able to see the difference at all. What a strange restriction. What a strange place. At this moment, the place where Yi Xian was already deserted. In front of Yi Xian was a mound of earth. Yi Xian could vaguely make out the shape of a sword furnace. Logically speaking, a sword furnace built by an ancient almighty should not have been destroyed even after thousands of years. However, the sword furnace had already cultivated into a beast. Naturally, it could not exist for long. Instead, The broken swords and broken materials that were casually thrown around were rather well preserved. This time, Yixian did not need the system to tell him that these things were good stuff. The materials that the ancient Almighty used to forge divine swords, even if they were just scraps or leftovers, were definitely ancient resources now. Therefore, Yixian would not let them go. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained an ancient material, 7 night corners. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained an ancient material, Fengqi undying wood. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have obtained an ancient material, 8 desolates 6 directions longevity, holy water. One system notification after another sounded out. Yixian had a smile on his face. This time, he made a huge profit. Not to mention using these ancient resources, even if Yixian used them to devour them, Yixian would still be able to reach several levels. However, Yixian would not devour them, because these materials were all good stuff. They could definitely be used to forge divine weapons. Even if they were not used to forge divine weapons, the god-slaying sword could still evolve after devouring them. Therefore, these materials were kept by Yixian in the devouring space. However, although these things were good stuff in Yixian's eyes, they were trash in the eyes of the swordsmithing beast. Master, this trash is everywhere. What do you need it for? Trash? Yixian glared at the swordsmithing beast. This kind of trash, no matter how much there was, Yixian would accept it all. You mean to say that there are such things here? Yes, master. There's a warehouse in front. It is where these trash and broken swords are stored. Yixian did not waste any more time and walked towards the so-called warehouse. A warehouse. It was indeed a warehouse. In a huge stone cave, there were countless materials. Perhaps this place had been well organized before, but now there was no one to take care of it. Naturally, it was in ruins. Ancient God Emperor Engen. It is said that the ancient God Emperor Tree of Grace no longer exists. Who would have thought that I would be able to find the ancient God Emperor Engen here? Although the ancient God Emperor Engen is not a material for forging weapons, it can be used to carve Dharma images. It is very beneficial for collecting faith points. Chapter 2484. Sword Forging Legacy. Could this black bead be the eyeball of the evil Sky King, one of the 12 heavenly dragons? Why would it be here? The evil Sky Dragon fought against several human experts alone. It is said that the human race suffered heavy losses in order to attack the Heavenly Dragon tribe, which gave the other divine beast tribes a chance. Heavenly Demon Feather. Is this the Heavenly Demon Feather? The Heavenly Demon tribe is an extinct mystical tribe. I didn't expect to find a feather left behind by them here. Yixian looked at everything in front of him in astonishment. All these things made Yixian feel as if he had entered a huge treasure trove. Materials were constantly being absorbed into Yixian's devouring space. These things, whether or not they were useful in the eyes of the ancient Almighty, even if they were trash, were absolutely good things now. For Yixian, this was a great opportunity that could only be found by chance. Yixian would not give up this opportunity no matter what. Yixian would definitely take all these things away. Resources were constantly being categorized. Those that Yixian recognized would be taken away. Those that he didn't recognize would be appraised by the system. Those that he couldn't appraise would be kept. However, not everything was useful. Many materials were useless because of the lack of other supplementary materials. Sigh, what a pity. This is the main material for refining the Heavenly Saint Divine Seal, but the other essential special material for refining the Heavenly Saint Divine Seal has long been extinct. Even if I get this thing now, I can't use it at all. What a pity, what a pity. Forget it. Since I can't find a suitable use for it, I can't waste it. I'll just devour it. Yixian waved his hand, and the material that had been deemed useless was directly devoured by Yixian. Ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through. The host is now a superior level 6 divine emperor. Yixian didn't pay attention to the system's notification because Yixian knew very well that there would be more levels later. Resources were quickly categorized. Yixian had picked up a huge bargain this time. It could be said that the harvest this time was extremely rich. If compared to the harvest in the ancient Zither space, not to mention the fact that there were not many resources in the ancient Zither space, even if there were in quantity, it was impossible to obtain so much. The harvest this time was probably enough for the ancient Zither space to produce for 1,000 years. At the same time, the resources that Yixian deemed to be useless were also devoured by Yixian. One had to know that many of the resources that Yixian had devoured were already considered unique existences in the God realm. They were already extinct. However, Yixian didn't hesitate to devour them all. The value of these things could not be measured with spirit stones. Many experts had some special hobbies. Among them, collecting extinct resources was something most experts liked to do. However, Yixian didn't care. Ding! Host has broken through. The host is now a superior level 7 divine emperor. Along with the system's notification, it was unknown how many resources Yixian had devoured. This item was the material of a divine beast. This divine beast was called the Moon Devourer Spirit. It was a mysterious ancient divine beast. In the realm of the gods, not to mention the moon, even starlight was hard to find. However, the Moon Devourer Spirit had a special ability. It could use a strange ability to gather all the scattered energy of the divine moon. In the ancient era, the Moon Devourer Spirit was already an extremely rare existence, let alone now. The realm of the gods naturally didn't have such a divine beast anymore. As for their spirit moon pearl, the one that Yixian had just devoured was probably the last one in the realm of the gods. The spirit moon pearl didn't have many uses. It could only emit a strange kind of moonlight. This moonlight was very beautiful and very gentle. It had a special effect on retaining a woman's beauty. It was said that if one used the spirit moon pearl to build an underground palace, not to mention living in it all year round, just going there once in a while would have the same effect as taking a face-retaining pill. Unfortunately, this item would no longer exist in the realm of the gods in the future. The sword-forging beast looked at its master in confusion. In the sword-forging beast's heart, it couldn't understand Yixian's joy at all. It even wondered what was wrong with Yixian. One had to know that in the sword-forging beast's heart, these things were just trash. They were all worthless things. However, Yixian liked them so much. This was what the sword-forging beast couldn't understand. Yixian practically dug 3 feet into the ground to identify everything that he could see. He kept the useful ones and devoured the useless ones. He didn't waste anything that wasn't even worth devouring. In the future, he would leave it for auction. It would definitely be a fortune for the customer. When Yixian was finally done, the sword-forging beast said to Yixian, "Master, please follow me. The only place in the house that is still intact is here. The original owner set up a restriction here. I can't enter at all. However, I can be sure that the inside hasn't been destroyed." Did that mean that these places outside had already been looted by someone? Yixian's expression turned ugly. This meant that there were many other good things here. Of course, Yixian recovered after a short while. After all, even if someone had ransacked this place, it would have been many years ago. Moreover, it was very likely that it wasn't done by humans. One had to know that these things were all good things, even in the ancient times. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be so many things left here, regardless of whether it was a human or divine beast expert who came here. There were only 2 reasons to explain why there were so many good things here. One was that the person who looted this place was definitely more powerful than the ancient times. The other possibility was that the thing that destroyed this place was something without intelligence. Yixian didn't dwell on this question. He followed the sword-forging beast directly to the restricted area. There was an ancient restriction set up here. For a moment, Yixian couldn't do anything about it. However, Yixian wouldn't give up. Since there was a restriction here, it meant that there might be something completely sealed inside. Yixian's understanding of restrictions was quite good. After all, he was a restriction master. At the same time, he was also a divine talisman master, array master, and so on. Therefore, it wasn't too difficult for him to study this array. At least, it was easier for him compared to others. It could be said that if Yixian couldn't break this restriction, There wouldn't be many people in the entire realm of the gods who could. Yixian sat cross-legged and began to think. He sat there for a whole year. For a year, Yixian didn't move at all. It was as if he had turned into a stone. The sword-forging beast also stayed by Yixian's side, silently waiting for Yixian. On this day, as usual, Yixian sat cross-legged. The sword-forging beast silently glanced at Yixian. When it saw that Yixian still didn't move, it prepared to go out for a stroll. Chapter 2485. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio Divine, Heavenly Sword Request. So that's how it is. A faint voice, just 4 short words. But these 4 words have been waiting for a full year. After a year, Yixian finally understood them. Yixian did not care about the situation around him. The sword-forging beast consciously guarded Yixian while Wei Zhentian controlled the god-slaying sword to move around Yixian. Yixian silently stood up and walked to the side of the barrier that was like a light screen. Then, he directly pressed his hand onto it. A bright light burst forth and pierced through the clouds. It could be said that from the outside, the entire mountain peak was emitting a bright light. Unfortunately, no one knew where this light was coming from. Moreover, this was a drought sea. The ancient beast would not do such a thing. The light continued, but Yixian's body slowly faded. It was the power of the stars. Wasn't Yixian's current state the translucent state he was in when he understood the power of the stars? It turned out that the power of the stars had been incorporated into this barrier. How many people in the realm of the gods had the power of the stars? To have the power of the stars, to have a good understanding of barriers, and to have sufficient strength. In the current realm of the gods, it would be difficult to find anyone other than Yixian. It was as if this place was specially built for Yixian. Of course, this was something that was impossible. The only explanation was that in this era of great sword-forging masters, the power of the stars was a very common thing. The light in Yixian's hand continued to shine, and the barrier quickly reversed. The method to open the barrier was very simple. It only needed to reverse the direction of the barrier. Perhaps this place was not a restriction at all. It was merely a door. However, this door was made using a special method, and the power of the stars had been incorporated into it. That was why it was so mysterious and unbreakable. The root of all this was the power of the stars. It could be said that if it weren't for Tianhu, even Yixian wouldn't have been able to do anything to him. Yixian pushed the door open and entered. However, when he entered, he found that the interior was not filled with treasures as he had imagined. Instead, there was only an altar and a box. Yixian silently walked over, but in his heart, he was incomparably puzzled. Could it be that this ancient supreme being only had this kind of box as his collection? Then what was in the box? Yixian used his divine telekinesis to probe the box. After confirming that there was no danger, he took the box. Opening the box, an illusory figure appeared. It was an old man wearing a 5-colored battle suit. He had grizzled hair and a smile on his face. Finally, someone has obtained my inheritance. The 10 million years of waiting have not been in vain. Yixian was shocked. Just what kind of cultivation level did one need to be in order for a strand of soul to not be destroyed for thousands of years? One had to know that since the sword-forging grandmaster was no longer around, his godhead had probably been shattered. Yet, a strand of his soul had actually survived for tens of thousands of years. Greetings, Senior. Yixian respectfully bowed to the strand of soul. After all, this was an expert from thousands of years ago. Yixian still had to show some respect. Dispense with the formalities. Fated person, the fact that you are able to come here means that we are fated. I don't have much time, so I won't say too much nonsense. This box contains my sword-forging inheritance. I only hope that you can promise me one thing. You must definitely master the divine heavenly sword. Divine heavenly sword? Yixian was a little surprised. He didn't know how powerful this divine sword that had been separated by the ancient almighty for tens of thousands of years was. Senior, may I know what's so special about this divine heavenly sword? There's nothing special about the divine heavenly sword. It's just a wish of mine. This divine heavenly sword was nurtured with the power of faith. We spent millions of years to gather the power of faith of countless believers. This divine heavenly sword represents a belief that the world is harmonious. Kid, your current cultivation level is still too low, so it's impossible for you to come into contact with something of that level. However, I have to tell you, kid, don't underestimate the power of faith. Only the power of faith is the purest form of energy. The power of faith was a cultivation energy. Xian was even more confused. After all, Xian had been using the power of faith all this time, but he didn't see that it could be used for cultivation. However, Xian also knew that this old man wouldn't lie to him. Then, was it because the inheritance of the thing the old man was talking about had been lost? Or was it because his strength wasn't enough to understand that level of existence? Xian didn't know that much. Of course, Xian couldn't care so much. Since this divine heavenly sword was the wish of this almighty swordsmith, and Xian had obtained his inheritance, then helping him forge a divine heavenly sword wasn't a big deal. All right, senior, look, I promise you, as long as I have the ability, I'll definitely forge this divine heavenly sword. Good, good, good. The almighty swordsmith repeated the word good 3 times before continuing. Then, I'm relieved. This remnant soul of mine has been sealed by me using a special method. I don't know anything else. In fact, you can treat me as a letter. Now that you've obtained the inheritance, my mission can be considered complete. After saying that, the remnant soul turned into specks of starlight and disappeared. Xian bowed to the remnant soul again before receiving the wooden box. Obviously, the wooden box wasn't made of ordinary wood. Otherwise, it wouldn't have remained intact for thousands of years. Unfortunately, Xian didn't know what the box was made of. Inside the box was a bamboo scroll. The forging method recorded on the bamboo scroll was no longer in use. However, there was something special about these bamboo slips. They were capable of recording a lot of things. Perhaps it was because, in that era, the bamboo scroll was the best at recording things. Xian quickly accepted the knowledge regarding the forging of divine swords. This almighty swordsmith was special. He could only forge all kinds of divine swords. It could be said that he could forge divine swords of all kinds of quality. Moreover, many of the quality were already beyond the current era. Xian called them immemorial mystical armaments. This method of forging immemorial mystical armaments was probably the only one in the entire God realm. Xian silently left. In this world that had been sealed for thousands of years, Xian didn't want to destroy it. Let's go, little cauldron. Let's leave this place. Xian directly led the swordsmith beast out of this special area. When they left, they even concealed the aura of this place. It could be said that other than Xian and the swordsmith beast, it was impossible for anyone to enter this place. Chapter 2486. Strengthening the god-slaying sword. Xian's trip to the Drought Sea was not in vain. Even if Xian did not gain anything later on, Xian had already made a huge profit. The method of forging immemorial mystical armaments recorded in the sword forging legacy had long been lost. Of course, the materials required were also very special. It could be said that even the lowest grade required ancient resources. Fortunately, Xian's devouring space could provide these resources, so there was nothing to be afraid of. After Xian left, he did not continue exploring the Drought Sea. Instead, he found a remote place and set up restrictions and arrays. He built a furnace and prepared to forge a sword. Of course, he was not forging a sword, but strengthening the god-slaying sword. The god-slaying sword was already considered extremely powerful, but according to the records of the sword forging legacy, Xian discovered that the god-slaying sword still had many shortcomings. This time, Xian's goal was to integrate the arrays into the god-slaying sword. Of course, the integrated array was not ordinary. It was a special array called 1 becomes 10,000. The effect of this array was that once it was activated, it could turn one god-slaying sword into 10,000. Once it succeeded, the benefits would naturally be indescribable. Little Cauldron, Divine Wood Sword Attendant, Wei Zhentian, watch for me. No one is allowed to disturb me. Xian instructed the sword forging beast and the rest. Then, he sealed the cave and locked himself in. Practicing in the cave would not affect him at all, and it would also prevent some troublesome things such as light and sound. Fire eyes. With a wave of his hand, a 7-colored flame immediately rose from the sword furnace. This was the lowest grade of flame. The mysterious 7-colored flame was just the flame that Xian used to nurture the furnace. This time, Xian needed to use a total of 12 different flames. Each of these flames could be said to be extremely rare. Fortunately, Xian had learned them all from the sword forging legacy. This sword forging legacy included the inheritance of flames, materials, arrays, runes, and other aspects. It was definitely not just the sword forging legacy that he had imagined. If he didn't have the system, he wouldn't even be able to comprehend these things without hundreds or thousands of years. The flames slowly began to change, and Xian did not hesitate to throw a pile of special resources into the sword furnace. The God Slayer silently floated there, quietly waiting. This training lasted for a total of 49 days. 49 days was not a long time, but unfortunately, it was enough to attract a lot of things. 3 days ago, Xian had already sensed strange movements from the outside world. To be more precise, someone was attacking the mountain gate. But at that time, Xian was at the most critical juncture of his sword training, so he could not afford to slack off in the slightest. He could only turn a blind eye. At this moment, there were more than a dozen experts gathered outside Xian's cave. Although the ancient beasts cultivated their bodies, they were also very interested in divine weapons. To them, a good divine weapon was even more attractive than countless supreme cultivation techniques. Just 3 days ago, a burst of sword intent had erupted from the cave. That was because Xian had not been able to conceal it in time while he was practicing his sword. That sword intent was incomparably sharp. It was just sword intent, but it seemed to be able to cut through heaven and earth. Therefore, the ancient beasts had charged over without hesitation. However, when they arrived, they discovered that there were 3 irksome fellows blocking their path. A sword, a divine beast, and a person. The sword was naturally transformed from Xianxia. The divine beast was the sword-forging beast, and the person was the divine wood sword attendant. Master is practicing his sword. Unauthorized personnel are not allowed to enter. The sword-forging beast spoke in human language and stepped out. But why would those experts care so much? In the eyes of the ancient beasts, divine swords were innate. There was no such thing as practicing the sword. Because there were many ancient divine weapons left in the Drought Sea, the ancient beasts had always thought that the divine weapons they found were bestowed by the heavens. Now that they heard that someone was practicing the sword and were not allowed to enter, how could they agree? They thought that the sword-forging beast was just making up an excuse. Practicing the sword? Why haven't we heard of practicing the sword? Do you think we are stupid? Brothers, let's charge over. They must have hidden divine weapons. The ancient beasts said that they were not stupid. They were probably the only ones who would believe those words. However, these fellows were lacking in the head to begin with. Thus, without any explanation, they directly attacked. The divine wood sword attendant had strong defensive abilities. At this moment, they were not at a disadvantage when fighting against the ancient beasts. Xianxia transformed into the god-slaying sword and moved around to provide support. The sword-forging beast supported from a distance. The 3 of them worked together and barely blocked the attacks. Unfortunately, it was just barely. As the battle progressed, it was obvious that the 3 of them were not strong enough. After 3 days, the sword-forging beast was already dispirited. Even its legs were trembling. Apparently, it was seriously injured. As for Xianxia, he had changed the shape of his Dharma treasure many times. Only the divine wood sword attendant was slightly better. Unfortunately, it was only slightly better. At this moment, it was covered in wounds. Rumble. There was the sound of thunder. It was the power of divine thunder. The power of the divine thunder suddenly descended. One strike, just one strike, and the entire mountain was reduced to dust. It turned out that the god-slaying sword had finally taken shape. At this moment, it was guiding the divine thunder to do the final consolidation. Practicing the sword with divine thunder was the most common method of sword forging that Xian had obtained. Moreover, the more powerful the divine thunder was, the better the effect. The destructive power finally made the ancient beasts stop what they were doing. They looked into the cave in confusion. At the same time, a figure was also walking out. Step by step, the figure walked with light steps. There was a faint smile at the corner of his mouth. "Master." In an instant, the sword-forging beast and the other two immediately returned to Yi Xian's side. Wei Zhentian even directly removed his Dharma treasure form and hid in Yi Xian's body. The divine wood sword attendant was still guarding in front of Yi Xian. However, Yi Xian said indifferently, "All right, you go and rest. Leave the rest to me." The ancient beasts looked at Yi Xian in confusion. However, they could see that behind Yi Xian there was something special about the god-slaying sword. "Hand over the divine weapon, and we will spare your life," a powerhouse from the ancient beast clan said resolutely. Unfortunately, what answered him was a powerful attack. "You all are courting death." Yi Xian was never a person to be bullied, especially when someone bullied him. Moreover, it was a foreign race. Eternal Night Field. In an instant, all the ancient beasts lost their vision. No matter how strong his physical body was, without divine will, they were trapped in the eternal night field. They cannot see anything. I can't see. Kill. It's dark. Why is it dark? Chapter 2487. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo, Studio 1 to 10,000. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not continue to attack. Yi Xian was waiting for the god-slaying sword to complete its last step. Yi Xian wanted to use these guys as test subjects for the god-slaying sword. The sound of thunder continued. The god-slaying sword was experiencing its own heavenly tribulation. Thunder rumbled. Every bolt of lightning made the god-slaying sword more condensed. As time passed, the heavenly lightning fell, causing ancient patterns to appear on the god-slaying sword. These patterns were the final result of Yi Xian's forging. Runes. Strengthening runes were on the god-slaying sword. They were the main medium for the god-slaying sword to possess the 10,000 sword avatars. These rune techniques had probably long been lost. The divine talisman of the divine talisman race, and these runes were two different things. The runes were very simple. Perhaps just a few simple lines had a unique use. The power of the runes was not simple. Unfortunately, the techniques used to create the runes could only be seen a little in the array. The runes now were not simple runes. They were ancient runes. Exquisite lines and simple techniques were the main methods used to create ancient runes. The power of the heavenly lightning that the god-slaying sword was experiencing was constantly refining the runes. Only by making the runes more condensed could the forging of the god-slaying sword be considered a true success. It could be said that the reason why this last process required the power of the divine lightning was because it was impossible for Yi Xian to rely on his own strength to strengthen the rune. Lightning flashed continuously. If one encountered such heavenly lightning during the heavenly tribulation in the lower realm, not to mention such a chain of heavenly lightning, even the power contained in one of them would be unstoppable. It could be said that even if Yi Xian personally resisted the power of the heavenly lightning, he would not be able to withstand more than a few bolts. However, the god-slaying sword was experiencing 999 bolts of heavenly lightning. The heavenly lightning descended at an extremely fast speed. Although it was slow, it was only half an hour. This half hour was extremely dangerous. It could be said that the god-slaying sword could break at any time. However, the god-slaying sword was not an ordinary divine sword. Therefore, the god-slaying sword persevered. The lightning disappeared, and the god-slaying sword returned to Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian held the god-slaying sword. It did not seem to be any different, but he knew that the god-slaying sword had already undergone a great change. It's time to test out the new power of the God-Slayer. I want to see what kind of power the God-Slayer has now. God-slaying sword slash. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The God-slaying sword turned into thousands of phantoms in the air. These were not illusions formed from divine power, but real existences. They were replicas constructed from the power of some mysterious law. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, the numerous ancient beast clansmen trapped in the Evernight domain suffered an unimaginable blow. The god-slaying swords turned into streaks of light in the sky, heading straight for the ancient beasts. One after another, the sword lights connected without any gaps. Pucci, no matter how strong the bodies of the ancient beasts were, how could they withstand the sharpness of the god-slaying sword? One had to know that the god-slaying sword had been tempered by the divine thunder, making it even sharper. The ancient beasts were pierced through one by one. Perhaps they did not understand what was going on until they died. In the Evernight domain, they could not see anything. They could only endure in silence. When the last god-slaying sword fell, Yixian finally removed the Evernight domain. At this moment, in front of Yixian was a broken world. Many ancient beast clansmen were cut into pieces by the god-slaying sword. The terrifying power of the god-slaying sword increased its power by several times with just one forging. The power of the swordsmithing inheritance was even more powerful than Yixian had expected. Obtaining this inheritance might be more useful than obtaining several powerful supernatural powers. Devour. With a wave of his hand, Yixian devoured the ancient beasts. After all, the corpses of the ancient beasts were still useful. Ding! System notification. Host has broken through to Superior Rank 8 Divine Emperor Realm. 2 levels in a row. This time, the devouring allowed Yixian to rise 2 levels in a row. It was obvious that these ancient beasts were strong. Unfortunately, they only cultivated their physical bodies. In that case, they would not be able to resist the god-slaying sword at all. Yixian lamented in his heart. No matter how strong one's physical body was, it was a pity that there were still flaws. If there were the same number of strong cultivators with the power of precepts, perhaps Yixian could use the power of the god-slaying sword to kill them, but it would not be so easy. In fact, Yixian might even be killed instead. Yixian had heard that one should not be too greedy. The best way to cultivate was to be able to choose a suitable path and move forward. However, at this moment, Yixian had a different idea. The requirement of the title was to be able to control more power. Whether it was a secondary profession or a number of precepts, the more power one had, the stronger one would be. And now, the result of the ancient beast's physical body was right in front of Yixian. Perhaps in the realm of the gods, the saying that one should not bite off more than one could chew did not make sense. In the realm of the gods, the simplest and most direct way to obtain more power was to cultivate more options. Whether it was a mystique, precepts, or a secondary profession, having more options seemed to be the best way to cultivate in the realm of the gods. Of course, although Yixian had this realization, it was not certain whether it would work. After all, no matter how strong a genius was, it was impossible to have too much power at once. If one cultivated too much, no matter how strong a genius was, it would not be enough. Of course, in the realm of the gods' tradition, no one would really cultivate too much. However, Yixian's realization was telling Yixian that there were benefits to cultivating too much. Let's go. Let's leave this place. Yixian waved his hand and put away the divine wood sword servants. Then, he led the sword-forging beast outside. Along the way, Yixian continued to look for ancient beasts to kill. After all, ancient beasts were so easy to kill, and they gave a lot of experience. If he did not kill them, what else could he kill? Until Yixian's actions finally attracted the attention of the truly strong ancient beasts. On this day, Yixian was killing ancient beasts as usual. Then, he devoured their corpses to increase his cultivation level. However, the sky suddenly darkened. From the sky, an incomparably huge black shadow descended. It was a strange, mechanical structure. It was like a pavilion that could fly. However, what drove it was not divine power or precepts. Instead, it was 3 strange birds. Chapter 2488. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio. The strength of the ancient beast general. As soon as the pavilion landed, they saw an ancient beast walk out from it. This ancient beast didn't look much different from the other ancient beasts. The only difference was that it was much larger in size. It was also wearing an armor made of an unknown material. Behind this ancient beast was a troop of ancient beast soldiers. When the soldiers saw Xianxia, they immediately said, "General, this is the strange fellow who has been killing our people." General? Ancient beast general? The classification of ancient beast strength was different from that of the realm of gods. Hence, their status was usually used as a symbol of their strength. During this period of time, it could be said that Xianxia had been killing ancient beast soldiers or ordinary ancient beasts. This was the first time he had encountered a general. During this period of killing, the ancient beasts did not attach much importance to him. In fact, they even underestimated him. In Xianxia's eyes, ancient beasts were just experience points that were easier to kill. Although this kind of action was somewhat unfair to ancient beasts were ancient beasts after all, not humans. Therefore, Xianxia naturally didn't feel any burden in his heart. It's like you stepped on an ant to death. Don't tell me you still feel uneasy. Although the strength of an ancient beast was many times stronger than that of an ant, it still felt that way. Who are you? Why are you killing my people? Do you have a death wish? These three questions only reinforced Xianxia's belief in their ignorance. Xianxia did not attach too much importance to the ancient beast general. He did not even bother to waste his breath. He chose to attack immediately. Godslayer attack. The Godslayer's ability to split itself into 10,000 was very effective in the Drought Sea. Hence, Xianxia did not hesitate and attacked immediately. However, this time, the result was beyond Xianxia's expectations. The attack was ineffective. The Godslayer turned into 10,000 rays of sword light and rushed towards the ancient beast general. However, the attack was ineffective. All the attacks hit General Ancient Beast, but General Ancient Beast didn't even move. It allowed the God-slaying sword's attacks to hit it, but it didn't leave a single mark on General Ancient Beast. Perhaps the only result of this battle would be to destroy General Gushou's armor. "How dare you damage my armor?" As he said that, the Ancient Beast General smashed his fist into Xianxia. It was so strange that Xianxia was almost unable to react in time. Luckily, it was only a little bit more. Xianxia reacted in time, but he only managed to take a few steps back. The advantage of taking a few steps back was that the punch did not directly hit Xianxia. However, it did not mean that it did not affect him at all. It was just the wind from the punch, but it made Xianxia feel extremely pressured. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. This ancient beast general was really too strong. It was so strong that even the wind from the punch had such power. Xianxia stopped underestimating him. This time, he realized that such a terrifying existence existed in the Drought Sea. Continue fighting? If Xianxia knew that he couldn't win, then he would be an idiot if he forced himself to continue fighting. Xianxia wouldn't continue fighting. After just one blow, Xianxia already knew how strong General Ancient Beast General was. Xianxia didn't dare to delay at all as he retreated like a madman. Some things had to be done decisively. Xianxia already knew how strong the Fallen Fire was. Why would Xianxia continue fighting? Was he looking for trouble? Flee in a sorry state. At this moment, Xianxia no longer had the attitude of casually killing those ancient beasts. The current Xianxia was already quite fearful of the ancient beast general. His attack had been completely ineffective, while the ancient beast general's attack, even if it was just a casual blow, was enough to make Xianxia feel extremely uncomfortable. This was the gap between them, an extremely huge gap. Therefore, Xianxia could only flee. Fortunately, after this period of time, Xianxia had already leveled up. At this moment, Xianxia was already at the peak of the 9th grade Divine Emperor realm. A superior grade, 9 Divine Emperor, was only one step away from reaching the Godly Venerate realm. Xianxia's initial goal was to reach the Godly Venerate realm before leaving this place. However, the appearance of this ancient beast general forced Xianxia to change his mind. It seemed that there was a reason why the Drought Sea was classified as a forbidden zone in the demon god's domain. Even the Divine Lord had personally led a team into this place and returned in defeat. After all, if a general had such battle strength, there must be other experts above the general. For example, a commander or a king, and it was unknown how strong these experts were. Overall, although the later stages of body refinement were weak, they still had the advantage. At least in the early stages, it wasn't easy to deal with them. Xian left quickly because he was temporarily unable to contend against the ancient beast general. It could be said that if Xian wanted to leave, no matter how many ancient beasts there were, they wouldn't be able to stop him. As for this mere ancient beast general, it would be impossible for him to stop Xian. Xian's figure flashed continuously. With just a single infinite teleportation, the ancient beast general couldn't do anything to him. No matter what, the ancient beast general could only move on foot. However, Xian could infinite teleportation. Not only was his movement unpredictable, but his speed was also extremely fast. The ancient beast general couldn't do anything about it, and could only eat Xian's dust. Xian moved crazily until he retreated 1,000,000 miles away. Only then was he truly safe. It was unknown whether the ancient beast general didn't really intend to pursue Xian, or if it couldn't keep up with Xian's movements. In any case, Xian was already far away from the ancient beast general when he retreated 1,000,000 miles away. Xian didn't choose a direction when he ran. Instead, he moved forward at will. However, he was retreating towards the periphery. Unknowingly, Xian was already very close to the yellow sand zone. Xian could already see the edge of the yellow sand zone through his spirit consciousness. At this point, Xian stopped moving forward. What should he do next? Should he choose a new direction and continue to explore the Drought Sea? Or should he leave? If he continued to explore the Drought Sea, he might be able to find other opportunities. Without mentioning anything else, just killing ancient beasts and raising his cultivation level was an extremely good choice. However, since Xian's actions had already alarmed one of the ancient beast general, it was very possible that no matter where Xian went, he might encounter other ancient beast generals. Hence, this choice wasn't very good. Bing didn't hesitate for long before he made his choice. He decided to leave the Drought Sea. The core of the Drought Sea might have many unknowns, but Xian didn't want to continue exploring. The danger was secondary. The main reason was that Xian didn't feel that there was a more mysterious inheritance in the Drought Sea than the sword-forging inheritance. Chapter 2489. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios' secret territory of despair probably not. Therefore, even if Xian continued to explore the Drought Sea, he would only find some treasures that were not very useful. Since that was the case, why would Xian continue to explore the Drought Sea? After making up his mind, Xian quickly passed through the yellow sand and found the heavenly tiger. "Boss, you're out." Tian, who was pleasantly surprised when he saw Xian. Because of the special nature of the Drought Sea, Tian, who did not support Xian's decision to enter the Drought Sea. After all, Tian, who thought that it was extremely dangerous for Xian to enter the Drought Sea. However, Tian, who was not qualified to stop Xian's decision. Even though Tian, who was the one who told Xian about the Drought Sea. Tian, who was very clear about the dangers of the Drought Sea. Tian, who immediately said, when Xian came out, "It's good that you're out. The Drought Sea is too dangerous. If you're interested in finding opportunities, you might as well go to the 12 Despair Secret Lands. After all, there are countless treasures in the 12 Despair Secret Lands, and the dangers are relatively lower." Xian didn't feel that there was anything wrong with the trip to the Drought Sea, and he was already very satisfied with the things he obtained. Therefore, Xian didn't care about the dangers of the Drought Sea that Tianhu mentioned. On the other hand, the 12 absolute domains that Tianhu spoke of attracted Xian's attention. 12 Despair Domains? What is that? Boss, the 12 Despair Domains are quite famous in the Demon God domain. Many experts who have reached the Divine Emperor realm choose to go there to find opportunities to break through. The 12 Despair Domains are 12 secret domains. It is said that these 12 secret domains are the cave mansions left behind by the previous experts. Among them, 3 of them were left behind by the Divine Lords. Cave dwellings? Xian frowned slightly. However, Tianhu continued. In our demon god's domain, many experts have a habit. When they know that they are about to die, they will seal their life savings and inheritances in a secret realm in a special way, waiting for the fated person to open it. Among the 12 absolute domains, 5 inheritances have been discovered, creating many shocking experts. However, there are many other places that have yet to be discovered. Earlier, you said that you were looking for a suitable place, but I didn't think of it. Now, it seems that the secret lands of the 12 despair domains might be more suitable for you than the Drought Sea. As long as you can obtain any one of the inheritances, it will be enough to benefit you for life. However, every time the secret lands of the 12 despair domains open, it will definitely attract countless experts. A bloody battle is unavoidable, and it may be a little tricky. Was it troublesome? For Yi Xian, this shouldn't be a problem. Yi Xian didn't feel that there was anything wrong with the trip to the Drought Sea. Instead, he felt that he had profited greatly. At this moment, even if Yi Xian didn't obtain anything from the secret lands of the 12 despair domains, he wouldn't feel that he had lost anything. Therefore, Yi Xian wanted to see what was so special about the secret lands of the 12 despair domains. All right, let's go to the secret lands of the 12 despair domains. You lead the way. Yes, boss. The secret lands of the 12 despair domains open every year. Coincidentally, the secret lands of the 12 despair domains will open in the middle of next month. We have enough time to go there now. Tianhu seemed to be a little happy. After all, Tianhu didn't dare to go with Yi Xian to the Drought Sea. However, Tianhu dared to enter the secret lands of the despair domains. He had even participated in the secret lands of the despair domains once before. However, the secret lands of the despair domains had already been obtained by others, so the danger level was not very high. Although the secret lands of the despair domains were guarded by the experts, the main danger came from the other divine beasts. After all, once a treasure was discovered, it was inevitable that a battle would occur. In Tianhu's heart, he was confident in fighting against the other divine beasts. However, he wasn't confident in facing the ancient beasts in the Drought Sea. Therefore, when Tianhu heard that Yi Xian was willing to go to the secret lands of the despair domains, he was so happy. The two of them set off quickly and headed directly to the secret lands of the despair domains. However, Yi Xian didn't know that at this moment. In the demon god dominion, the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe was having a meeting. The leader was shockingly the punishment elder of the Heavenly Dragon Drunk Shrimp clan. It turned out that ever since the Sky Tiger tribe had won first place in the intersect competition, the division of resources and authority in the tribe had changed greatly. In the past, the punishment elder had great authority in the tribe and was able to obtain many benefits because his grandson had done well and even surpassed Tianhu. So what if Tianhu was the Holy Son? If it wasn't for the authority of the Sky Dragon Deity General, he would have been stripped of the title of Holy Son. In the eyes of the punishment elder, only his grandson was worthy of the title of Holy Son. In the past, because Tianhu's performance was mediocre and his grandson's performance was incomparably outstanding, the punishment elder did not have any other thoughts. He only wanted to use the power in his hands to obtain more benefits for his grandson, and he did it. It could be said that whatever Holy Son Tianhu had, his grandson would definitely have, and what Tianhu didn't have, his grandson might have. However, it was different now. He didn't know where Tianhu had found such a strong backer, but his strength had suddenly soared, and he had won against his grandson in the intersect competition. As a result, the punishment elder felt a strong pressure. He felt that his position was no longer secure, and the authority in his hands was being divided and squeezed by the Sky Deity General and the other elders. How could the punishment elder take this lying down? Therefore, although peace was maintained on the surface, the entire Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe could feel that an internal change was about to begin. The demon god's domain naturally couldn't be so united. The Sky Deity General naturally had his own opponents. The punishment elder's choice was very simple and crude. He chose an old rival of the Sky Dragon Deity General as his backer and prepared to find a suitable opportunity to unite with the external enemy, overthrow the Sky Dragon Deity General and take the position of Patriarch himself. It could be said that all the plans were secretly arranged according to his expectations. One by one, the experts of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp Tribe were bribed. If they were not effective, he would find an opportunity to get rid of them. The Punishment Elder was in charge of the Punishment Elder. He was the second most powerful figure in the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp Tribe. If he wanted to do something, it was simply a simple matter. In a short time, in fact, more than 6 elders of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp Tribe had been killed. On one hand, the Punishment Elder used the name of investigation to carry out operations. On the other hand, he was thinking of ways to find Xianxia and Tian Hu and get rid of them. Chapter 2490. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios Tian Hu's scheming ways, however, Tian Hu was leading Xianxia to the land of despair, so it was inevitable that they would pass by many places, including cities. The news quickly reached the disciplinary elder's ears. "Elder, this is what happened. My disciples found the 2 of them there. However, they seem to be in a hurry, so they only stopped for a short while before continuing on their way. All right, some more people. You must find those 2 fellows for me. I'll arrange people now. This time we must get rid of those 2 fellows." "Yes, Elder." The disciplinary elder's face was full of viciousness as he left. This time, he was determined to get rid of Xianxia and Tian Hu. Xianxia was extremely mysterious. The disciplinary elder had always felt that Xianxia was not a simple person. However, things were different now. Now that he had the support of another divine general, the disciplinary elder was naturally confident. He felt that he had a good chance of getting rid of Xianxia and Tian Hu this time. Even the Heavenly Dragon Divine General didn't know much about the changes in the Heavenly Dragon Drunk Shrimp race, let alone Xianxia and the Heavenly Tiger. After 2 days of hurrying, they finally arrived at the Land of Despair. Every time the Land of Despair opened, there would inevitably be many people who wanted to try their luck. In many people's minds, as long as they did not enter the core area, they would not be in any danger. It was precisely because of this that many people came with the intention of giving it a try. Of course, there are also some people who came with the intention of obtaining the inheritance. At the moment, only a few dozen holy princes had gathered outside the Land of Despair. There were even more powerhouses. Xianxia and Tian Hu were mixed in the crowd, but many people still recognized them. Tian Hu was considered a special existence among the holy princes. Many people had different rumors about Tian Hu. However, there was one thing in common. Many holy princes did not care about Tian Hu's strength at all. In the hearts of many saints, Tian Hu was a guy who only knew how to use brute force in close combat. He was not a threat at all. Many people even felt that Tian Hu only knew how to fight with brute force and was not qualified to be a saint. If it weren't for Tian Hu's father, Tian Long Divine General's powerful battle prowess and influence, these holy sons would have refused to submit. Thus, when Tian Hu arrived, he immediately heard the sharp and unkind voices. "Oh, isn't this our great heavenly tiger, Saint Sun? I didn't expect him to still be alive and kicking. I thought our heavenly dragon Saint Sun had already died. Seems like I was overthinking. I didn't expect our heavenly tiger Saint Sun to still be alive and kicking. Haha, brother, you are wrong to say that about our sky tiger Saint Child. Are you not afraid that he will go back and tell the great heavenly dragon divine general? At that time, you will have to bear the consequences." That's right, that's right. The sky tiger Saint Sun is not someone to be trifled with. If you dare to be disrespectful to the sky tiger Saint Sun, be careful that you will be dealt with. Everyone spoke one after another, but their words were full of ridicule. Obviously, no one really put Tian Hu in their eyes. Xianxia could sense Tian Hu's anger. He could tell from his tightly clenched fists that Tian Hu was suppressing his anger. However, this time, Xianxia patted Tian Hu's shoulder and used a secret technique to communicate with him. "Don't bother with these guys. Just wait and make them stay in the absolute secret realm forever." Xianxia's words were extremely straightforward. How could the heavenly tiger not understand? Xianxia wanted Tian Hu to start a massacre in the absolute secret realm. There was no need to bother with him now. Tian Hu was stunned for a moment before a fierce expression appeared on his face. Tianhu fully agreed with Yi Xian's words. If others wanted to humiliate him, then he would take their lives and make them repent with their deaths. In order to nurture the heavenly tiger, Yi Xian had spared no effort. After all, Yi Xian had already prepared to nurture the heavenly tiger into his loyal servant. Yi Xian didn't need an indecisive follower. What Yi Xian needed was that as long as he gave the order, no matter what kind of enemy it was, the heavenly tiger would dare to charge forward and risk his life. Yi Xian wanted a person who was full of courage and had the courage to fight at any time. Although he wasn't like the divine wood sword attendant or the divine flower sword attendant, who couldn't disobey Yi Xian's orders and didn't give him the slightest discount, a follower like the heavenly tiger was still necessary. After all, there were times when it was inconvenient for Yi Xian to personally handle things, so leaving them to Tian, who was the best choice. Therefore, Yi Xian naturally would not teach Tianhu about morality and benevolence. In a world where the strong were respected, there was no such thing as morality and benevolence. Yi Xian would only make Tianhu even more black-bellied. He would only tell Tianhu that the goal was the root and the means were only means. Of course, this process had to be done slowly. Even if Tianhu could not disobey Yi Xian's orders, Yi Xian still hoped that Tianhu would be willing to work for him. He also wanted Tianhu to be willing to work for him. He also wanted Tianhu to like the tasks he gave him, because this was the only way to achieve the greatest effect. Actually, Yi Xian did not make this arrangement on the spur of the moment. He had already had this idea for a long time. It could be said that when he was in the Jiufang's 60,000 mirrors, Yi Xian had hoped to have such a person by his side, because with such a person, many things could be simplified. With the expansion of Yi Xian's influence and strength, Yi Xian could not be said to be alone in the realm of the gods forever. Partner, subordinate, competitor, and enemy. In the future, there would be more and more people like Yi Xian would not be able to do everything according to his own wishes. Even if he could, it would not be good for him to do it himself. Therefore, from that time on, Yi Xian had the idea of grooming such a follower. Tianhu's appearance gave Yi Xian an opportunity. Tianhu's talent did not need to be said. As long as Yi Xian groomed him properly, Tianhu would naturally become one of the strongest. This way, Tianhu would have the ability to complete any task Yi Xian gave him. At this moment, the surrounding people did not know what fate awaited them. They were still scolding Tianhu, mocking him, and even cursing him. If it were in the past, Tianhu would have flown into a rage or run away. But today, Tianhu had a faint smile on his face. He did not seem to care at all. This was because Tianhu was only thinking about the fate of these people. Chapter 2491. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor, Nioibo Studio Kill. Of course, this was also because this secret territory was deliberately left behind by the strong to train the younger generation's geniuses. Those who could participate in this secret realm were all super geniuses of the demon god domain. The majority of them were holy princes. Even if they weren't holy princes, they had similar talents. These people were called quasi-holy princes. Everyone waited in silence. Following a series of clicking sounds, the door finally opened slowly. The door was made of some kind of mysterious material, so it was not impossible to break it open by force. However, this place was guarded by envoys sent by the Divine Master all year round. If someone really tried to do so, they would be killed before they could even take action. Therefore, they could only wait for the door to open before they could enter. "Let's go in too," Yi Xian said to Tianhu. The two of them walked towards the door. At this time, everyone was thinking about entering the land of despair secret territory. Of course, Tianhu was an exception. The closer they got to this moment, the more excited Tianhu became. Although many people were extremely excited at this moment, Yi Xian knew exactly why Tianhu was so excited. When the array was activated, Yi Xian and Tianhu were directly sent into the secret territory. There were many people around them who had entered with them. However, most of them immediately left their original spot and rushed forward. This was not the first time the land of despair secret territory had been opened. Therefore, many people had been here before. Naturally, many of them had maps left behind by their ancestors. However, there were still people who recklessly ran in front of Tianhu. Aha! Holy Sun Shrimp, I hope you can pick up some trash in the Land of Despair's secret territory. Take care. Don't die in there. Tianhu glanced at that person and did not say anything. Instead, he looked at Yixian. Yixian lightly nodded his head and only said one word, "Kill." "Yes, boss." Tianhu moved. Tianhu, who had not said a single word or asked a single question ever since they had arrived at the entrance of the absolute domain, suddenly moved. Boom! It was an absolute suppression, an absolute instant kill. With the Dharma fusion talent and the super mystique that Yixian had given him, Tianhu was no longer as weak as before. His first place in the clan's grand competition was not a bluff. He had earned it through real combat. Therefore, with just one punch, the person who had spoken was already dead. "Tianhu, what are you trying to do?" Tianhu's sudden attack startled that person's companions. In their minds, Tianhu was an existence that only bullied the weak. In front of saint children like them, Tianhu never dared to resist. Of course, he also didn't have the strength to defend himself. However, why did Tianhu dare to attack today? He had even killed a holy sun. Although that holy sun's strength wasn't that great, he was still a holy sun. His status was as noble as theirs. What of my son? Actually, I don't want to do anything. I just want to borrow your lives to play with, Tianhu said indifferently. As he spoke, he was already walking towards the few people. Yixian watched Tianhu's action silently. Yixian was waiting for Tianhu to kill all these people. It could be said that if Tianhu could not even do this, it would be difficult to nurture him. "Tianhu, how dare you? We are all holy sons. If you kill us, aren't you afraid that the elders of our clan will kill you? Tianhu, don't think that you could do whatever you want just because your father is Divine General Tianlong. I am equivalent to a holy son and am specially taken care of by the Divine Master. If you act recklessly, the Divine Master will not let you off." These people were afraid. After all, Tianhu had killed their comrade in one move. This was something that they had never experienced before. In their eyes, Tianhu had always been weak and could be bullied. But now, Tianhu had actually dared to kill his comrade. This was something that they could not imagine. "What are you talking about? Take him down. How dare he kill us? Take him down first," someone shouted. The few people immediately got into formation and prepared to fight Tianhu. Tianhu was still a little nervous. After all, he had to face several experts alone. This was something that he had never experienced before. However, when Tianhu turned his head and saw Yixian standing behind him like a passerby, he was immediately filled with energy. This was because Tianhu believed that as long as Yixian was around, there was nothing that he could not do. "Come at me together so that I won't have to waste my time later," Tianhu said indifferently. The giant prawn Dharma form behind him had already appeared. "You're courting death." The few people roared and rushed towards Tianhu at the same time. Boom, boom, boom. In an instant, the battle was extremely intense. However, Yixian was still watching from the side. He did not seem to have any intention of joining in. At this moment, there were not many people around. Most of them left as soon as they appeared. This was because compared to the battle between Tianhu and the others, the special inheritance in the absolute secret territory was more attractive. The battle did not last long. Although Tianhu was struggling, he still defeated the group of people in the end. There were a total of 5 people in the group. However, at this moment, 2 of them had already shut their mouths forever. The remaining 3 people had already knelt on the ground, kowtowing to Tianhu and begging for mercy. They could tell that the current Tianhu was no longer the Tianhu that they could bully. The current Tianhu was not only extremely powerful, but he was also very decisive in his attacks. They were afraid, so they begged for mercy. However, it was already too late for them to beg for mercy. Tianhu did not hesitate. He immediately attacked and killed those people. After doing all this, Tianhu returned to Yixian's side. Yixian waved his hand and swallowed the corpses of those people. Then, he looked at Tianhu and said, "You should know what to do next, right?" Tianhu nodded and said firmly, "Boss, I understand. As long as they humiliated me, I will not leave a single one of them alive. It's good that you understand. Go. I will wait for your good news. Yi Xian waved his hand. Tian, who bowed slightly to Yi Xian, turned around and chased after them. The direction he left in was the same direction that those people had left in. At this moment, Yi Xian was quite satisfied. It was not only because Tian Hu had killed those people as Yi Xian had expected, but also because of Tian Hu's performance. Yi Xian had just swallowed the corpses in front of Tian Hu. Although it seemed like Yi Xian had just taken the corpses away, it was not clear what Yi Xian had done. Chapter 2492. Translator, Transin Editor. Transin discovering a divine beast. Yi Xian had Tianhu's law fragment with him, so there was a special connection between them. Although the range of the connection was limited, it wasn't too far away. However, at least it was enough to be used in the Land of Despair. Therefore, Yi Xian wasn't worried that Tianhu wouldn't be able to find him. Yi Xian didn't come to the Land of Despair just to train Tianhu. Since Tianhu had made his move, Yi Xian naturally had to make his move as well. Yi Xian was interested in the so-called inheritance in the Land of Despair. Although he didn't know what kind of inheritance it was better for him to find it himself than others. Therefore, at this moment, Yi Xian also identified a direction and charged forward. Since this absolute domain secret realm was called a test, and it was a test that contained inheritances, then naturally, it couldn't be that peaceful and simple. Yi Xian hadn't gone far when he heard the sound of an intense battle. When Yi Xian walked over to take a look, he saw 5 holy sons besieging a divine beast. The divine beast was surrounded by flames. With every movement it made, the flames would sometimes soar into the sky and sometimes change into different forms. It actually had a certain level of self-consciousness. Yi Xian could see that these movements weren't controlled by the divine beast, but by the flames. Strange. Could it be that the flames of the divine beast are another type of life? Yi Xian was puzzled. At the same time, he said to the system, detect this divine beast. I want to see what's so special about it. Ding. System notification. Target set, dark fire, nitrogen, flame beast. First grade, lower ultimate god realm. Special ability, spiritual divine flame. The dark fire nitrogen flame beast and the flames on its body were 2 life forms. However, they shared the same consciousness and share the same body. Therefore, strictly speaking, it was also a divine beast. Yi Xian was slightly stunned when he saw the description. It was actually a symbiotic divine beast. Yi Xian had heard of symbiotic divine beast before, not to mention a 2-body symbiosis. Even a 3-body or 4-body symbiosis was not impossible. However, the symbiotic beasts Yi Xian knew were all the same type of life form. For example, there was a symbiotic beast known as the 2-headed dog. It was also a symbiotic beast with 2 heads. Each head had its own ability to think, but they shared the same body. However, this was Yi Xian's first time seeing a divine beast coexisting with flames. Yi Xian had never seen the spirit god tribe coexisting with a divine beast before. At this moment, the 5 people had surrounded the divine beast and were continuously attacking it. However, he couldn't achieve much in the battle and was even suppressed. After all, symbiotic beasts often had special abilities. Even if they were at the same level, they would be able to gain an advantage, let alone when facing an enemy who was at a lower level. Through the system, Yi Xian found out that there were 5 high-grade celestial emperors surrounding the nitrogen flame beast. 2 of them were peak high-grade god emperors, and because of this, the 5 of them could barely contend against the netherfire nitrogen flame beast. However, if this continued, the 5 of them wouldn't be able to hold on any longer. Brother over there, please lend us a hand. We will definitely reward you handsomely after we slay this divine beast. Yi Xian didn't try to hide himself, so he had already been discovered by one of the people present. Yi Xian found this a little funny when he heard this. In Yi Xian's opinion, what was the difference between them and the nitrogen flame beast? Weren't they both divine beasts? The only difference was that the netherfire nitrogen flame beast couldn't take human form. Yi Xian found it strange that a divine beast would refer to its own kind as a divine beast. However, Xian wouldn't lend a helping hand. The five sages had nothing to do with Xian. If they were really related, it would be because of the natural hostility between humans and divine beasts. It was already good enough that Xian wasn't taking advantage of the situation to launch a sneak attack on them. How could they expect Xian to lend a helping hand? Xian stood silently to the side. He didn't make a move, but he didn't leave either. He just watched the battle in silence. When the five sages saw Xian's reaction, they thought that Xian wanted to take advantage of the situation. Therefore, they immediately shouted at Xian, "Brother, this divine beast isn't a guardian divine beast, and we don't have any treasures to obtain. Please help us slay it. Once we are free, we will definitely reward you handsomely." Help them? Help these five sages slay the divine beast before them? That was impossible. To Xian, even if all the sages of the demon god domain died, Xian wouldn't feel the slightest bit of pity. This was because the more sages of the demon god domain died, the better it would be for the Kunlun god domain. As the saying goes, those who walk different paths cannot work together. Moreover, Xian and these guys were even from different races. Why would he care about their life and death? Therefore, Xian continued to watch silently. The battle continued. As time passed, the five of them found it harder to resist. Seeing that Xian didn't seem to have any intention of helping, the leader finally shouted, "Retreat." The five of them covered each other and quickly left the battle, fleeing into the distance. If it was really as they said that the divine beast wasn't a guardian divine beast, then the divine beast would definitely chase after them when they left. However, that wasn't the case. The five of them fled, but the divine beast didn't leave its position at all. Xian's mouth twitched slightly. These guys actually wanted to hide it from Xian. If Xian had just attacked, he would have been treated as a sacrifice and sacrificed for nothing under the divine beast clause. Not only would he not gain any benefits, he might even be scolded as a fool. What sinister intentions! At this moment, after the five of them retreated, they didn't go far. Instead, they looked at Xian from afar. One of them even scolded Xian like a god. "Brat, we asked you to help us. Why are you delaying?" Xian didn't intend to pay attention to these five saints, but when he saw how unreasonable they were, he was still a little angry. "Why should I help you?" Xian replied indifferently. What they didn't know was that Xian's reply meant that he was prepared to attack them. "Humph. We asked you to help us because we thought highly of you. Do you know who we are? How dare you disobey our orders? I think you don't want to live anymore." What a tyrannical saint. They clearly wanted to use Xian and sacrifice Xian to achieve their goals. However, Xian didn't send himself to his death. That was unforgivable in their eyes. However, the one who didn't want to live now wasn't Xian, but them. Xian couldn't be bothered to talk nonsense with them. With a wave of his hand, the God Slayer in his hand immediately levitated into the air. Chapter 2493. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio unique treasure. The god-slaying sword floated in mid-air, constantly emitting a powerful light. That light carried with it a soul-stirring power, causing the Holy Sun to subconsciously raise his head. However, at this moment, this fellow actually didn't realize that Xian had already intended to kill them. He actually said to Xian in a rather complacent manner, "Not bad, not bad. It's a good sword. Do you mean to use this divine sword as an apology? However, there's only one. How should the five of us split it?" Apology? Wasn't this person overconfident? Xian couldn't be bothered to pay attention to him. He casually waved his hand, and in an instant, the god-slaying sword slightly trembled before it covered the entire sky. With the special ability of 1 to 10,000, 10,000 identical god-slaying swords immediately covered the entire sky. When these divine swords appeared, they immediately fell with a loud bang. Boom, boom, boom. The sudden attack stunned the five people. Although not all of them were stupid enough to think that Xian would not attack them, there were 2 peak level 9 divine emperors among them. Therefore, they did not think that Xian would dare to suddenly declare war on them. Unfortunately, Xian didn't act according to their wishes. He didn't even say a single word and attacked, as soon as he said so. Damn it, someone cursed. At the same time, the light of the law of Tao lit up in an attempt to block the god-slaying sword's attack. The attacks rained down like rain. Each one of them was as powerful as the god-slaying sword itself. The god-slaying sword had been upgraded twice, and it had improved immensely. Even if it was just a sneak attack from the sword shadow, it was still extremely powerful. Boom! The shield of the weakest chosen saint was broken. In an instant, at least 100 god-slaying sword clones attacked him. Poof, poof. The sound of swords piercing into bodies was heard continuously. In just one move, one of 5 people died on the spot. The other 4 people's expressions changed drastically. Of course, they had used their divine thoughts to check Yi Xian's cultivation level. However, they could only see that he was a divine emperor. That was why they dared to be so arrogant. In their hearts, even if Yi Xian was at the peak of the 9th grade divine emperor realm, it would be impossible for him to win against 2 holy sons who were also at the peak of the 9th grade divine emperor realm. Or rather, he had no chance of winning at all. However, they did not know that Yi Xian was a peak level 9 divine emperor and had a permanent honorable title. In addition to that, there was a chance that Yi Xian would not be able to deal with them, even level 9 divine emperors. Kill Yi Xian with all his tricks. At this moment, Yi Xian's sudden outburst of strength had greatly exceeded the expectations of the 5 of them. They'd underestimated Yi Xian and overestimated themselves. That was why they'd ended up in such a state. If they hadn't underestimated Yi Xian, if they had been able to maintain their vigilance, then they wouldn't have been completely suppressed by the god-slaying sword's 10,000 transformations. Who are you? The leader dared not underestimate Yi Xian. Light flashed beside him, but he did not attack immediately. Instead, he questioned Yi Xian. The peak of the divine emperor realm was one of the best among the holy sons. It could be said that if there was a ranking list of the holy son's strength, these 2 people could be ranked in the top 100. Except for some saints who had never been seen before, these 2 people had more or less seen or heard of the rest of the saints. However, they had never heard of Yi Xian. What if Yi Xian was not a saint? With Yi Xian's age and his strength, it was impossible for him to explain it. That was why the leader had asked such a question. While this person was asking, Yi Xian suddenly sensed that the divine beast was a little anxious. Yi Xian and the others were clearly fighting in front of this divine beast. However, this divine beast did not seem to have any intention of backing down. It remained in its original position. Combined with the divine beast's sudden anxiety, Yi Xian thought that something must have happened to the thing this divine beast was guarding. Compared to the unique treasure guarded by the divine flame beast, these Shangzins weren't that important. So at this moment, Yi Xian directly said to the leader, "You guys can leave. If it wasn't for your mouth being too smelly, I wouldn't have attacked you guys. So, if you leave now, I can let bygones be bygones. Otherwise, you should understand the consequences." Yi Xian waved his hand as he spoke. The sword-forging beast, the divine wood sword servants, and the divine flower sword servants appeared at the same time. At this moment, other than the leader, no one else dared to challenge Yi Xian. They could clearly see that if Yi Xian wanted to kill any one of them, he could do it. The leader hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right, let's go." With that, the 4 of them immediately fled into the distance. Yi Xian did not have the time to care whether they really left or not. Yi Xian ordered the divine flower sword servants and the sword-forging beast to stand guard in the surroundings while he led the divine wood sword servants and walked towards the divine beast. When the divine beast saw Yi Xian coming over, it kept roaring furiously, as if warning Yi Xian not to go over. Otherwise, it would not be polite. Yi Xian did not care about it at all. However, the rare treasure had yet to be born, so Yi Xian did not want to cause trouble. Therefore, he just stood aside and waited silently. This wait did not last long. In less than 3 hours, the ground under the divine beast's feet suddenly shook violently. Clearly, the rare treasure had been born. For a moment, the sky was filled with colorful clouds, and the ground was overflowing with light. What exactly was it? This was the absolute mystic realm, the land of inheritance left behind by the powerhouses of the demon god realm. Could it be the birth of an inheritance? However, if it was, there should not be such a huge commotion. Or could it be a super rare treasure left behind by a fallen powerhouse of the demon god realm? Yi Xian waited silently for the results to be revealed. The ground was still shaking, and the shaking was getting more and more intense. After 30 minutes, a huge change finally happened under the divine beast's feet. Boom, boom, boom. Countless flames soared into the sky. It was magma from underground. Magma was actually spraying out. What kind of rare treasure would be hidden in the magma? Yi Xian released his divine perception and carefully investigated. However, this magma was not as ordinary as it looked on the surface. It had actually been refined by someone. Not only was it powerful, but it also had the ability to block divine perception. In just a moment, the entire ground had completely changed. Countless magma spewed out from underground, turning this place into a lake of magma. At this moment, a golden light finally emerged from the bottom of the lake. It was an extremely strange thing. It looked like a claw, but it did not look like one. Chapter 2494. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios snatched the treasure, roar. The divine flame beast's roar was filled with joy. It had finally arrived. He had been waiting here for 10,000 years. He had not left this place at all. He had been waiting for the appearance of the claw. Today, the rare treasure had finally appeared. Unfortunately, there was another person beside him who had taken a liking to it as well. To Yi Xian, since the rare treasure was a good item, Yi Xian would not let it go. Kill! Yi Xian waved his hand. The divine wood sword servants charged forward without hesitation. At the same time, Wei Zhentian controlled the god-slaying sword to attack first. Yi Xian waved the Rule Divine bow in his hand and shot out Rule Divine arrows. Absolute Zero. Eternal Night Field. Apart from the Eternal Field and Dharma power, Yi Xian had unleashed his full strength. At this moment, there was only the divine flame beast, so Yi Xian did not have to use all his trump cards. However, Yi Xian had underestimated the shamelessness of the four people. It turned out that after the four people left, they were still thinking about the rare treasure. They did not care about the death of their companions because they did not care at all. They only cared about the rare treasure. In order to obtain the rare treasure, they immediately called their friends the moment they left and told everyone that a rare treasure had appeared. In addition, the appearance of the rare treasure had caused a change in heaven and earth, which attracted more than 10 people. Therefore, when Yi Xian was fighting the divine flame beast, more than 30 people had surrounded them. However, among these people, there was one person that Yi Xian did not expect. Tian, who was also in this group of people. At this moment, Tian, who also saw Yi Xian. His expression changed slightly, but he immediately said to the people around him with a smile, "Everyone, since we are here, the rare treasure is naturally ours. Let's go and snatch it." Tianhu, come back. Let the others make the first move. What are we waiting for? If we wait for the others to make the first move, will we still have a share? Tianhu purposely let out a loud roar before charging towards Yi Xian. With a thought, Yi Xian understood Tianhu's intentions. Tianhu wanted to use others to kill the mythical beast and preserve his strength. After understanding Sky Tiger's intentions, Yi Xian also rushed toward Sky Tiger. The two of them fought fiercely in mid-air, but it was just an act. When the others saw the opportunity, they immediately rushed toward the divine flame beast. "Boss, what's that?" Tianhu threw a punch at Yi Xian and asked through voice transmission. "I haven't figured it out yet, but it should be useful for you," Yi Xian said as he kicked Flying Tiger. "Boss, are you saying that you've given that thing to us?" Tianhu crawled up and roared as he continued to charge towards Yi Xian. "It's useless to me. It's a claw. I don't like using this thing." Claws. Could it be God, Lord Qi use 3 lives, 3 destruction claw? Tianhu was extremely excited, but he made a mistake and his face collided with Yi Xian's fist. Tianhu quickly looked around and heaved a sigh of relief when he realized that no one was paying attention to them. "Why? Do you think that your face is harder than my fist?" Yi Xian smiled. He knew that Tianhu was excited. The 3 lives, 3 destruction claw was obviously a supreme treasure in the demon god domain. Yixian casually gave it to Tianhu, so Tianhu was naturally excited. Cough, cough. Boss, why don't we snatch it now? I can't wait any longer. Tianhu couldn't wait any longer. The 3 lives, 3 destruction claw was the supreme treasure that made the demon god domain's divine lord famous. Moreover, it was said that this treasure was refined by an existence stronger than the divine lord. How could he not be excited? Looking at the divine flame beast and those saints who were crazily killing each other, one could understand how deadly the temptation of this item was in the demon god domain. Since that's the case, stand aside. Yixian didn't want to waste any more time. At this moment, Yixian was ready to use the eternal territory. There were more than 30 enemies here, including a divine flame beast. Without using the eternal territory, Yixian wasn't confident that he could intimidate them. When Tianhu heard Yixian's words, he was slightly stunned. He still didn't understand Yixian's intention. In Tianhu's heart, Yixian's strength had always been a mystery. Because neither Tianhu nor Tianlong Divine General had tested Yixian's strength, they still didn't know what Yixian's cultivation level was. However, since Yixian asked him to stand aside, Tianhu had no choice but to stand aside obediently. Yixian's figure flashed as he directly descended from the sky and joined the battle. It's this guy. I thought he had given up. I didn't expect him to be so reckless and still dare to come. Kid, since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. At this moment, a holy sun rushed up and blocked Yixian's path. The battle below wasn't actually a one-on-one battle. Instead, it was divided into 3 groups. At this moment, seeing Yixian charge over, there were naturally people who tried to stop him. Yixian ignored that person. The eternal territory was Yixian's greatest trump card. However, he had only used it once since he obtained it. And today, Yixian was going to use it for the 2nd time. Eternal territory. Yixian waved his hand and activated the eternal territory. In the battle below, it wasn't that no one had activated their domains. However, once the eternal territory was activated, no power could stop it. With Yixian as the center, a powerful force spread out and enveloped more than half of the people. Of course, this included the flaming beast and the 3 births, 3 destruction claws. The strangest thing was that when the eternal territory was activated, it actually repelled and even wiped out the power of other domains within its range. Whether it was in terms of power or range, the eternal territory was too domineering. Of course, perhaps it was because these holy sons did not fully activate their domains when they were fighting. However, even so, the dominance of the eternal territory was beyond everyone's expectations. What are you trying to do? Don't tell me you want to challenge all of us by yourself? Seeing Yixian's actions, a holy son roared angrily. After all, Yixian had used the power of his domain to suddenly envelop all of them. Naturally, it would arouse suspicion. Unfortunately, there was no need for them to suspect anything. Yixian had already launched an attack. Godslayer kill. Following Yixian's command, the Godslayer immediately turned into thousands of swords. Like rain, streaks of sword light fell from the sky. PSSH, PSSH. At this moment, these powerful saints were shocked to find that they couldn't resist at all. No, what kind of power is this? This is impossible. Chapter 2495. Translator, Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio 3 births, 3 deaths, claw another few rays of sword light fell on the holy son who had his arm cut off. His godhead was shattered. The same scene was playing out in several other places at the same time, including the divine beast of fire. Powerful and invincible. It seemed that no one could find the words to describe Yixian at this moment. He was too powerful, so powerful that it was hard for them to accept. This was the first time Tianhu had seen Yixian's power. At this moment, his legs were trembling. Who could fight against such terrifying power? He had killed more than 20 people at the same time, and there was no lack of superior grade 9 divine emperors among them. This kind of power was simply unimaginable and hard to accept. Get lost, Yixian shouted. The remaining people did not dare to hesitate and retreated in panic. What else did these holy sons want to do? Xian had shown that he could kill them easily. If they did not leave now, they would not have the chance to leave. Xian looked at the result of his actions with satisfaction. Xian's soldiers did not chase after the holy sons who had left. After all, Xian was invincible in the eternal domain. However, once they left the eternal domain, Xian might not be able to do anything to them. Tianhu, go and take your claw, Xian said casually. Tianhu's body shook violently, but he immediately went over. At this moment, the surrounding people were envious. At the same time, they were wondering what kind of relationship Tianhu had with this mysterious expert. This was the 3 births, 3 deaths claw. This was a super divine weapon used by divine masters, but this person had casually given it to Tianhu. The 3 births, 3 deaths claw was the most powerful magical weapon of the previous divine master. This magical weapon was extremely powerful, and the most important thing was its special ability, the 3 births, 3 deaths. It was said that this magical weapon could even preserve a strand of the owner's soul and godhead. In battle, even if the owner died, he could use this strand of soul and godhead to revive himself. At the same time, the 3 births, 3 deaths was a strange fusion of the laws of time and space. Once it was displayed, it would be an extremely terrifying illusion. If there was a special magic treasure that could break it, it would be fine. However, if it couldn't be broken, what awaited the enemy would be the illusion of 3 reincarnations. Not to mention how many years he had been trapped in the illusionary realm. Just the fact that his strength had been greatly reduced after he came out was enough to make him suffer. This 3 births, 3 perishes illusion was somewhat similar to a seal. It was such a powerful rare treasure. The only pity was that Xian couldn't use it. Although the Demon God Domain and Kunlun God Domain both cultivated the power of laws, and both used divine force as the foundation for their cultivation, there was still a huge difference in body structure and other aspects. Therefore, most of the treasures created by the Demon God's domain were difficult for humans to wield. If one tried to wield them forcefully, not only would the power of the treasures be greatly reduced, it would also cause the treasures to backfire. Similarly, it would be extremely difficult for the experts of the Demon God realm to wield the treasures of the humans of the Kunlun God realm. Therefore, even if Xian obtained the 3 births, 3 perishes claw, he could only use it to devour. It was more practical to give it to Tianhu. Increasing Tianhu's strength wasn't a bad thing for Xian. Tianhu quickly kept the 3 births, 3 perishes claw in his hands and played with it fondly. Xian had given Tianhu something 3 times, and all 3 times it could be said that Tianhu couldn't resist the temptation. Tianhu was extremely excited. At the same time, he was extremely grateful to Xian. "Thank you, boss." After half a day, Tianhu could only squeeze out this sentence. Because he was too excited, he couldn't say much. With the rare treasure in his hands, Xian naturally wouldn't stay any longer. He brought Tianhu and left. The surrounding shungs of the Demon God domain watched as Xian took the 3 births, 3 perishes claw, and gave it to Tianhu. Other than feeling envious, there was nothing they could do. After all, Xian's strength had already exceeded their expectations. He could fight more than 20 people alone. He could even kill them in an instant. What kind of power was this? How terrifying was this power? Who was he? In an instant, rumors about Xian's identity began to circulate. The appearance of the 3 births, 3 perishes claw was already a huge piece of news. Along with this news, there were even more speculations about Xian's identity. After all, Xian's youth was obvious to all. Furthermore, his strength was incomparably strong. Some people said that Xian was a reclusive Xianxia. Others said that Xian was a super existence secretly nurtured by a large clan. What made people not know whether to laugh or cry was that some people suspected that Xian was the 9-path Xianxia. They actually suspected that Xian was Luo. Xian and Tian, who didn't continue to stay in this desolate area for too long. This was because Xian knew that with such a precious treasure in hand, it was inevitable that others would try to steal it. And if Yixian didn't leave quickly, there might be endless troubles. After all, there were many people who would risk their lives for the 3 births, 3 perishes claw. Even some of the older generation experts would take action. Tian, who had already cultivated the 3 births, 3 perishes claw, and was extremely excited. However, before the two of them could decide on their next destination, Tian, who received a piece of news. After reading the news, Tian, who frowned. His expression was filled with anger. "What's wrong, Tian Hu?" Yixian asked Tian Hu. Tian Hu didn't hide anything and said directly, "Boss, there's news from within the clan. The head of law enforcement has colluded with other clans and started a rebellion. He has already sent experts to kill us. As for the clan, it's already a mess." The Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimps tribe had an internal rebellion? Yixian frowned slightly. This matter wasn't directly related to Yixian. However, it wasn't completely unrelated. Each of the 8 deity generals had a secret passage that led to the Master God battlefield. From there, they could return to the Kunlun God domain. If Yixian could use this opportunity to leave, it would undoubtedly be a good thing. Besides that, through Tianlong deity general, perhaps Yixian could obtain more information about Luo's whereabouts. Then, let's return to your clan. "Boss, you mean that you're willing to help me?" Tian Hu was extremely excited. In Tian Hu's heart, Yixian was omnipotent. It could be said that Tian Hu's current achievements were all thanks to Yixian. It was Yixian who gave him the ancient resources, the ancient mystique, and the powerful 3 births, 3 perishes claw. Without Yixian, the Heavenly Tiger probably wouldn't even be ranked among the Holy Sons. Other than borrowing his father's name, Tian Hu was nothing. It was Yixian who gave Tian Hu all of this. Therefore, Tian Hu always felt that there was nothing that could stop Yixian. "Yes, I'll go back with you." Yixian nodded and replied. The two of them didn't delay and set off immediately. At first, the journey was rather peaceful. Chapter 2496. Ambush. In order to not be recognized by the people chasing after them, Tianhu and Yixian had disguised themselves. Yixian had even specially refined a divine talisman that could change one's aura and carry it with him. Unfortunately, even so, it was still discovered. Since Yixian and Tian, who could think of using a divine talisman to hide themselves, how could the people chasing after them not think of the same thing? Therefore, as soon as Yixian and Tian, who entered the territory of the Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe, they were immediately surrounded. "Young master, you're back. I'll bring you to see the Patriarch and the other elders now. The tribe has fallen out." A Sky Dragon Drunk Shrimp tribe member came to Tian Hu's side and said to him, at the beginning, neither Tian Hu nor Yixian noticed anything unusual. They thought that this person was really here to pick up Tian Hu, so they didn't hesitate to follow him and directly followed him forward. But after walking for a while, Tian Hu found something strange. "No, this isn't the direction of the tribe's discussion hall. Where are you taking me?" "Young master, you don't know. The main hall is in chaos now. A few elders want to betray the Patriarch for some reason, so the Patriarch temporarily retreated to Elder Juyi's side." That person's words seemed to be reasonable, but if Tian Hu didn't know that it was the disciplinary elder who betrayed them, he would have believed him. This Elder Juyi was in cahoots with the disciplinary elder, and he was a trusted aide. At this moment, this guy was trying to bring Tian Hu and Yixian to Elder Juyi's side. He was undoubtedly trying to lure Tian Hu and Yixian into a trap. "Damn it, you're with the disciplinary elder. Go to hell." Once he figured this out, Tian Hu did not hesitate at all. He immediately used his killing move. "Young master, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. If you force us to attack, I'm afraid you won't have it easy." Tian Hu didn't expect that person to be an expert. Although Tian Hu's all-out attack repelled him, it didn't kill him. "Damn guy, since you've become a traitor, don't think of leaving here alive. Today, I don't care which branch you're from, I'll kill you with my own hands." Tian Hu was furious. After all, if anyone knew that their family was in chaos, they wouldn't have a good time. He was already holding the 3 births, 3 destruction clause in his hand. The current Tian Hu was no longer the saint who could be bullied by anyone. He was no longer the saint who only knew how to fight in close combat. The current Tian Hu now With Yi Xian's support, he was no longer Who Was Yi. Die for me. Tianhu suddenly roared as he swung to kill him. As he swung his arm, the powerful Dharma. Boom! With a loud bang, the assassin was sent flying. Tianhu didn't intend to let him off so easily. He waved his hand, and a powerful force spread out. With a thunderous sound, that person was once again sent flying. He didn't die, Yi was to be killed, as Tian was to be. In the end, Tianhu's cultivation level was still too low. Even if Tianhu allowed the enemy to attack him, he couldn't break through his defense. Capture him. That person stood up as if he wasn't attacked at all. He immediately gave the order to capture Yi Xian and Tianhu. Following his order, hundreds of Sky Dragon drunk shrimp tribe clansmen rushed out in an instant. Young master, we only wanted to invite you to Elder Jui's side. However, since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame us for being ruthless. Kill. Charge, kill. Capture the Sky Dragon Saint, and the disciplinary elder will reward you handsomely. The assailants didn't hesitate as they charged at Tianhu. They didn't even bother to call him young master. Now, they had completely betrayed him. Tianhu was furious. Unfortunately, with his limited strength, he couldn't do anything to those people. At this moment, Tianhu could only place his hopes on Yi Xian. Yi Xian lightly raised his hand and indifferently said to Tianhu, I'll kill these people. Boss, don't let them die so easily. These damn traitors, we must let them taste pain before they die. Tianhu didn't plead for mercy for his tribesmen. Instead, he asked Yi Xian not to kill them all in one go. He wanted to torture them until they were dead. Of course, the Heavenly Tiger was only joking. Whether it was the Heavenly Tiger or Yi Xian, they both knew that in this situation, the most important thing was to quickly kill these enemies that were blocking the way and reach the main hall. Since the disciplinary elder dared to start a rebellion, it was obvious that he was prepared. It could be said that no one knew what was going on in the main hall. Wei Zhentian attack. Yi Xian ordered. Of course, when Yi Xian ordered Wei Zhentian to attack, it was the same as ordering the God-slaying sword to attack. After all, Wei Zhentian could control the God-slaying sword at the same time. One becomes 10,000. Once again, the God-slaying sword launched a powerful attack. In the sky, streaks of sword light could be said to have covered the sun. However, these incomparably powerful sword lights automatically locked onto those assassins. Boom, boom, boom. The continuous sound of explosions indicated that a portion of the assassins had died. Under Wei Zhentian's concentrated attack, the weaker assassins could only be killed. Suddenly, Yi Xian's figure moved, and he actually charged forward. Divine Rule Arrow. As Yi Xian charged forward, he pulled the string of his Divine Rule Arrow. Streaks of incomparably powerful Divine Rule Arrow followed by the God-slaying sword lights fell continuously. In the blink of an eye, the entire area was filled with flashes of light, and the sound of explosions rang out incessantly. I'll let you have a taste of this move. Suddenly, Yi Xian waved his hand, and the God-slaying sword returned to Yi Xian's hand. God-slaying slash, 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 boom. An enemy was sent flying and turned into a rain of blood in midair. Then, another enemy was struck by Yi Xian's sword. There was a treasure in front of him that tried to block, but Yi Xian slashed the treasure in front of him in half. Die, all of you! Yi Xian waved his hand, and a crescent-shaped sword light flew out. Two enemies were cut in half at the waist, but the sword light did not weaken. It directly hit a mountain in the distance. That mountain could be considered to have suffered an unexpected calamity. It was actually cut in half. Rumble. The collapse of the mountain did not affect the battle here. God-slaying slash, slash again. Boom. Yi Xian slashed out with his sword again. The berserk power didn't even give the enemy time to react. He was already dead on the spot. Yi Xian's frenzied attack was so powerful that the enemy did not even have time to react. Go!